So welcome again, everybody. We got all of the attendance and coachee stuff out of the way. Um, this is the module on the masculine and feminine principle, and it's pretty much the foundation of all of Jungian psychology. I mean, if there's any module that's the most important module in all of if you're in this for 6 modules, if you're doing all 6 modules, this one is the foundation. It's the one that all the other modules build on. Because even when you go into the Hero Quest module next, it uses masculine and feminine principles. Even when you do pretty much anything in Jungian psychology, it uses the same masculine and feminine principles. But this module also can have a tendency to be a little bit contentious sometimes because of the way or the ideas people have about sex and gender. And I just want to kind of get a few things out of the way before we really get into the principles themselves, okay? So when we talk about masculine and feminine principles, this has nothing to do with what is in your pants, what it is in your genetics. It also, so that can be anything. It also has nothing to do with what is in your web browser history, okay, your preferences. All right. It has nothing to do with that. You can have any combination of being a male or a female, um, and normos, heterosexual, homosexual, any other variation thereof, and you still have these masculine and feminine principles because the masculine and feminine principles, as we define them here in this class, are traits, they're characteristics, they're energies, and they can be in any kind of mixture whatsoever, in any kind of person, in any combination. And in fact, what you'll find out as we go through this is that people, every human, has both principles within them that operate, and it's almost impossible to have only one or the other operating within you. Everybody has both operating within them. Okay. So given that, I also want to make sure we have an idea of some basic terms that you should have gotten from before. Like I'm going to assume the fact that you understand um, things like what is an ego, right? Your ego is the conscious part of yourself. I'm gonna assume you understand the unconscious, right? What we mean by unconscious. The ego is the part of you that you think is you, that it's the part that thinks in words, it's the part that's very logical, right? But the unconscious is below that. And the definition is the name, right? The unconscious. You're not conscious of what goes on there. It operates independently. And stuff goes on there that is very creative and symbolic. It doesn't think in terms of words or sentences or things like that. It thinks in terms of symbols and it thinks in terms of concepts. And when you speak to it, it's going to speak to you in symbols and concepts and not really words. Also, archetypes, that's another one that's going to come in because when we work with the masculine and feminine principle here, you're going to find that they are archetypes. Archetypes, just really quickly, are at the root of all of at the bottom of it. Archetypes are really instincts. We're all human beings, and whatever kind of human being you are, from wherever you were born or wherever you live, we all understand some of the same things. Like we understand night and day, light and dark. We understand hot and cold. You may not even know your mother and father, but you still know what a mother and a father is. You have that concept. You understand sibling, sister, brother. You understand lover. You understand son, daughter. Whether you have those things or not, no matter what culture you're from, that's just being human. There's just things that we know. Those are where the archetypes come from. The things that are common to all humans, the human instincts that produced But the layers that go on top of the archetypes can be different depending on your culture and your religion and where you're from. So archetypes give rise to images, right? Because the unconscious talks in images. Images give rise to ideas. So the images and the ideas can be a little different depending on the culture. And then the ideas are what influence us. So, but at the base of it all, archetypes are instincts. So just what, and some of the archetypes besides masculine and feminine can be conscious, like the ego is an archetype. We all have like an instinct to be conscious, an instinct to go about our day. You have a persona, right? The persona is the image you present to the world, your front, right? You're seeing my persona right now of Jungian coaching instructor, right? But if you were one of my four children, you would see my dad persona, and you'd be hearing quite a few more dad jokes than you guys will probably hear, right? If you were one of my students in a university, you'd be seeing the professor persona. If you were a martial arts student, you'd be seeing this Sensei Josh persona, right? We all have different personas. Our identities are a network. You're not any one thing. So the persona is a type of archetype. Um, there are also two other principles. One of them you should have had, and one of them we're going to work with a lot today, this class. The first one is the transcendent function. So all that, the transcendent function is just a fancy Jungian psychology term for the part of you that makes unconscious things become conscious. The transcendent function is the part of you that makes unconscious things become conscious. We all have that urge. Some of us deny it, some of us don't want to do it, but we all have that urge to make the unconscious conscious. Is what drives us. But there's also another principle here called the compensatory function. And the compensatory function is going to be the basis of pretty much everything we do for the next 3 days. Okay. The compensatory function at its core just really says that nature likes a balance. Nature hates it when things are not balanced. And you see this in our minds, and you see this in the physical reality too. I'll give you an example of the compensatory function in your physical body, okay? And then we'll take it to the mind. Let's start that way. Let's say you sprain your ankle, okay? And your ankle never really quite gets better. So what happens? Well, in order to compensate for your bad ankle, you're going to start walking a little bit weird. You're going to change the way you walk a little bit. And what that does is it changes the angle of your knee a little bit. So you're changing the angle in your knee to compensate for your ankle. So what happens to your knee? Your knee starts to degrade and you get a bad knee. So what do you do then? You change the way you walk again, except now you're doing something a little bit different with your hip. So you're compensating for your knee with your hip to balance the weight of your body. You want to keep the weight of your body balanced. So you change how your hip works. And then what happens? You mess up your hip, right? So you can almost see how the compensation travels up the body from the ankle to the knee to the hip, and then you start having back problems. And then that goes up your spine. And there's a trail of all of orthopedic ailments that just you can follow from the ankle to the neck because of compensation. When your balance is off, you're going to change something to correct for it. And the same thing happens in your psyche, All right. When something in your psyche is unbalanced, you're going to develop a correction in another part of your psyche. So if there is something in the unconscious that is unbalanced, you're going to develop a correction in your conscious mind or the other way around. And this is the compensatory principle. This is a natural thing that we all do. We can't help it. This is just what we do. We're humans. Okay. So I kind of was able here to go through an introduction of the terms just so we get all these terms. So what thoughts or what ideas do you have or what do you want to know? Just leave it out to the group. Go ahead. You can come off mute and talk anytime you want. Okay. So the male and the female principles are compensating for each other. All right. And
May I ask, Jules?
AJ, go ahead.
Anima and animus, are they like considered as are they considered archetypes or something else?
They are considered archetypes. But the other thing you got to understand is that let me share a screen here. Can you guys see a blank screen? Just give me a verbal if you can.
Yep.
Yeah.
Archetypes are not they're a little bit illogical because the unconscious is illogical. If you're thinking about it's like you have one archetype here, and then here's another archetype, and then here's another archetype. It doesn't always really work that way. Okay. Archetypes can be linked or they can be pieces of each other. So you can have, for instance, an anima archetype, right? And inside the anima archetype, there could be other archetypes. You could have a mother, you could have a daughter, you could have other archetypes inside the anima archetype, and sometimes not, right? And sometimes archetypes are just linked, like they have a linkage between them. And so it's not very logical, but the anima is an archetype, and you will find that there are other archetypes inside the anima and also the animus. Did I answer your question?
That was very well put. Yeah, very well explained. Yeah.
Thanks.
Gosh, I've got a question. With the male and female principles, are those always in polarity? Is there integration, and are they compensatory?
So they are compensatory and they integrate. So if you're not conscious of it and you're building up one principle, the other one will tend to take an equal and opposite position in the unconscious. And when you start to individuate, in other words, when you start to talk between the conscious and the unconscious, that imbalance tends to correct itself and they start to integrate. That's an ideal situation, right?
Great, thank you.
This was very interesting when you said that inside of anima there may be other archetypes. So I was thinking, is this only quality of anima and animus, or maybe other archetypes has also the same quality?
No, they're all linked. For example, the self archetype. This contains all other archetypes. Because the self, Jung defines the self as the totality of all of you, the totality of your entire psyche, your ego, your shadow, your anima, your animus, everything. So the self archetype you could almost think of as all of it. So we don't talk to the self archetype very much because it's too much. It would be like, I'll give you a corporate example. if you were to go to a company and you want to talk to a company, and you get everyone in the whole company into a room, and you shout at the company, what do you think about your company and how well it operates? You're going to get everyone shouting back at you, and you're not going to understand anything. It's too much. It's too much. So what do? You talk to HR, human resources. You talk to engineering. You talk to marketing. You talk to the CEO. You talk to these different pieces of the whole company in order to maybe get a sense of what's going on with the company. And then after you've talked to all of those, you get a sense of it. And then maybe if you talk to enough pieces of the company, at some point later, you can talk to the whole self a little bit. So this is why we work with coachees to talk with certain archetypes individually, because the self archetype in reality with corporate, the self archetype is like the whole corporation, but in a person, it's basically God. You don't know how to deal with it. And go ahead.
So one of the very first exercises we were shown was a conversation between the ego and the self.
Ah, yes.
And that was presented in the first module, and it's actually been, I found it very straightforward and useful for quite a lot of people. So I'm just surprised that you say it's a big challenge to talk to the self when we were presented it as if it was quite straightforward.
Yeah, because self has two definitions. So the self that I'm talking about through Jung's books is he's talking about the self archetype, which is like the entire everything. Erich Neumann, who came up with the ego self axis that we'll talk about later, he defines self as unconscious. He just calls the unconscious the self. So we're going to talk about, and you can absolutely talk to the unconscious.
Okay, because it was presented to us in the former version that the self the ego was talking to was the entity that contains everything. Anyway.
Okay. Now, so I see it as like this. Erich Neumann's self is just the unconscious. You can talk to the whole unconscious. Jung's self is like everything, the conscious, the unconscious, all together,
Right.
everything. So there's this confusing term there. I agree. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go into a little bit of an exercise with the class. I just want to make sure I got everybody's question before we go into this exercise. So just give me a thumbs up or a verbal if you're feeling good, or if you have a question, ask me a question. Okay. All right. So do you guys remember the survey that we gave you on masculine and feminine principles? All right. Did we all fill that out? Everybody filled that out? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, I mean, the questions, I don't need to go through them if you've already kind of gone through them all, but let me just fix my screen here. Some of the questions operate or ask about the masculine principles, like the red ones, and some of them ask about the feminine principles. And however strongly or you agree or disagree with them, you give it a number, and then you're going to get a red total and a green total. And we're going to ask you for your red total and your green total. Why are we doing this? Well, number one, it's interesting to know about yourself. But also, we're going to total this up and get an average number for each. So there's 23 questions. You can kind of see if I page through. Oh, there's more than that. Yeah, there's 23 male questions and 23 female questions. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take your total and you're going to divide each total by 23. So whip out your calculator, or if you're on Windows, go in the little search bar in the bottom and type calculator, and you'll get a calculator up. And so you want to get a number for your...
By 23, sorry. By 23, right?
Correct, yes, 23. You want to divide, get a total for red and a total for green. And those are your two numbers, right? And those numbers should be somewhere between 1 and 5 also, right? If it doesn't, then something's wrong. It should be between 1 and 5. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you, I'm going to go through everybody and you're going to read me your totals, and AJ is going to take them down, and AJ is going to create an average for the whole class. And what that's going to tell us is whether the class here, I have my suspicions, but we'll see, whether the class here leans towards masculine or feminine principles. And that will tell us how we expect the class to operate and where we might have some blind spots in the class. If the class comes out, for example, to be masculine, I can, as the instructor, expect a lot of analytical questions. I can expect to be endlessly questioned and analyzed about everything that we put up here. And I can also give analytical answers. If the class turns out to be feminine, then we know there might be a tendency for more emotional relation between the class and the instructors and the staff. And that we will want to make sure that we take care of that and nurture that. So you guys are ready? All right, so I'm gonna just go by my screen here and have you guys read AJ your numbers, all right? Olga, you're first.
Okay, my red is 4.2 and my green is 4.7.
Okay. Cliff.
My red is 4, my green is 4.2.
All right. Theodora. You're on mute, it's okay.
So my red is 3.21 and my green is 3.56. 5.6.
Okay. Imogen.
I've done this on paper, and on paper there's no red or green. So it's going to
Whoops.
take me longer to go through and put masculine and feminine next to each question and do the maths.
Okay, we'll come back to you.
Same here.
And I don't,
It's
and
all-
also you've only got 12 up, so I mean I can guess which is masculine and which is feminine, but sometimes they're a bit weird. So I don't have access to the whole lot to say what's what.
Oh, yeah, this was emailed to you. So
No, I know. It's just that I printed it off.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
I don't.
Are you done with the first 12 questions there?
No, I'm not, because
Yes.
I didn't realize you wanted this immediately, and I suddenly realized you're getting answers off everyone, so I'm slightly
That's fine.
panicking.
We're gonna come back to the two of you after we get through everyone. So just keep working, and if you need, I'll set the first bathroom break at that end of that, so that way you guys will have some more time to work. All right. So Alexandra, yeah.
The same. I did the same. I wrote it down by hand, so I will be fast, but I hope in a few minutes just to divide it again.
Can
Okay.
you give us the second sheet with all the what the genders they are, so we can
There you go.
I can note. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Other Alexandra, sorry.
Okay, so my red one is 3.69 and the green one 4.26.
All right. Thank you. Talita.
My red one 3.3 and my green one 3.8.
Okay. Lital's working. Stephanie.
Red is 2.9 and my green is 4.
Okay. Maria.
Red 4.78 and green feminine 3.96.
Okay. The
Hey,
Alexandra.
I'm sorry, just to make sure that the red one was 4.78, was it, Maria?
4.78.
4.78 and green 3.96.
Okay. And Malika.
So the red one is 3.34 and the green one 4.13.
Okay. Deanna.
Sorry. I can't get that.
Take your time.
Okay, I thought I'm not unmuted. Yeah, I'm doing the math now.
Oh,
I
you're
think.
doing the math now. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you guys a 10-minute bathroom break. For those of you that are still working, please use that 10 minutes to work on this. And then we'll come back here at 45 minutes past the hour. And then we will get your numbers. Okay.
Could you put up the next sheet of the
Right
next
there.
page of questions with the greens and reds?
You got it. There it
Brilliant.
is.
Thank you very much.
Yep. And I'll come back in about 2 minutes and flip it again.
Well, okay.
Enjoy your break.
I can write the numbers of the questions for red and green if that will help.
Feminine. Yeah, we need the next page now. It's just, oh, this is so irritating.
All right, here we go. Latal, your numbers. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. So for the masculine, it's 4.1. And for the feminine is 3.17.
Okay. And Imogen, how you doing?
All right, I've got masculine 4.09 and the feminine is exactly 4.
Okay. Deanna.
I got for masculine 3.4 and for feminine 4.7.
Okay. Alexandra.
For masculine, 3.5, and for feminine, 4.4.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, mine 4.17, not 4.7, the feminine.
4.17 for feminine.
Yeah.
Okay. And who did we leave out? Who else? I think that's everybody. Cliff, you came off mute. Did you want to say something?
Well, I'm not sure at this point. I know that you said that this could be contentious, and my intention is not to be contentious, but also not to avoid the complexity of masculine, feminine, how much of these are socially conditioned, and if Jung were here today, might they be called something else other than masculine and feminine? Because that is this polarity that's they're binary.
Yeah, actually, Avi sometimes refers to them as circle and line instead of masculine and feminine. Line being masculine, if you think like penetrative, and circle being the other term for feminine. So yeah, I mean, if these were not 100-year-old terms, then yeah, they could conceivably be called something different because they just describe traits. They're not really tied into. They're not really tied to, like I said, what's in your clothing and what's in your browser history.
Right, right, and thank you for that. But to the extent that they describe traits, is it not looked at through a lens of 100-year-old or a lens of socially conditioned traits? Being active is more masculine or the line, and being more receptive, compassionate is more circle. I wonder how we pull that apart as we're looking at this.
Yeah, and I mean you're not wrong. I mean they are created in a milieu, in an environment where that sort of thing was. I mean, they didn't even know they were doing it, you know. And yes, it is set up inside of that kind of a sphere. How do you remove the lens though, right? I mean, everything that we experience is through a lens. So you can't not experience something through a lens. So at this point, all we can really do is be aware that we are looking through a lens and that we're using a lens, and that we could decide at another time to use a different lens or not that lens, but absolutely it is a lens. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Okay,
May
so
may I comment something?
AJ, go.
Yeah, Cliff, that was an excellent question, and because in Finland, I'm in Finland, I'm Finnish, and so if you mention that something is masculine or something is feminine, that's like committing a career suicide. So that was an excellent question, and I prefer, for example, I prefer using being and doing, and for some reason it resonates even more. I understand the concept; it's an old concept, but I understand the point. But for some reason, doing and being is, I think it describes even more, even better, the whole idea, because instinctively I can understand completely what dynamic, linear, forceful, and so on and so forth, what it means. And I can feel the concept, but to name it specifically masculine, it's a bit difficult. It is a bit difficult, yeah. So to say, there is a lens, yeah, as Cliff mentioned.
There, and I agree with the being and doing. There are, if we just strictly speak here about being and doing, there are traits that are conducive to being, and there are traits that are conducive to doing. And if we talk generally in that sense, that's, I mean, it's evident, it's self-evident. So absolutely. And you will find that there's different terms for masculine and feminine as well that we use even in Jungian. We'll talk about anima, animus, right? And the being and doing are absolutely one of them. And when we look at the coaching materials, the cards, the being and doing cards, they even use being and doing on that. So absolutely, you guys are not off track here. Alexandra, you have a question?
No, I just want to comment that actually the being and doing triggered me immediately.
Oh yeah,
because it puts women on just being, which is traditionally considered actually the woman role, and the man as a doing. But like nowadays, roles are heavily changed. So women absolutely are doers. But anyway, I just wanted to point out how actually we all are coming from different cultural backgrounds. So we have completely different perception of the same thing.
Yeah,
that was my point. I mean, nothing else.
I want you to, when we talk about being and doing, all right, I want you to completely divorce that concept from whether you are a male or a female, or whether or what roles you have in life. Divorce the two concepts, because you can have any combination of a role and being and doing. All right, you can be a nurse and you can be a doer. You can be a housewife or a stay-at-home dad and be a doer. All right, you can be a stay-at-home dad and have some combination of being and doing. All right, it is two completely separate things. We're not, just want to make sure we get that clear. Alexandra.
No, I just wanted to what Alexandra pointed out for the different cultural backgrounds. Yes, I agree. For example, yeah, if for me, for example, masculine and feminine mean much more than being and doing. Being and doing, it's like something, I don't know, abstract or whatever. It's like whether you are masculine or feminine, you just you do both. I mean, it's being and doing. So it's like, so for maybe just for me, but without this masculine and feminine, it makes it easier, for me than just being and doing. It's like totally abstract. But it's like, yeah, she said it's totally cultural. So
absolutely. Diana, what did you want to add?
I like to add it from the Taoist and Chinese medicine perspective. I'm an acupuncturist, so we look at the feminine and masculine. It's a basic thing as duality in this universe, yin and yang. Yep. What aspects of the yang energy? It's more energy, it's more doing, it's more we operate during the day, and the yin energy is during the night. So we tend to label names as feminine, masculine, woman, men, but it's like we said, you know, like if we look at it as a concept of duality and opposites, and we as human beings, we came here to and have both opposites, and I can have this yin more or yang more, and you can have also as a male, you can have the yin aspect more than the yang, but it's just how much the combination, you know, like of those two forces. That's how I look at it.
And we'll see on some later slides that
Yeah.
masculine and feminine being, doing, whatever we want to call them, and perhaps if this class prefers to use the terms being and doing, we can do that. The yin and yang forces correlate exactly to the being and doing. All right, with yin being and yang being doing. So we will talk a little bit about that actually in future slides. Absolutely. Okay. All right, how do you guys feel about going on to the class averages now? Let's see. All right, AJ, what are our averages?
Yes. So the class average for the red one is 3.71 and the green one is 4.03. So the green one is slightly stronger.
The green one is slightly stronger. We have a slightly stronger being influence in the class, being traits. So then, and you can even see how the discussion we just had, right? It was a little bit emotional, you know. There was a little bit of a charge underlying it. So we are a being oriented class. So we'll keep that in mind as we go through. You guys can hopefully still see my screen, right? And all right, awesome. So in this module, you're right. We do have several names for the same thing, being and doing, anima and animus, feminine and masculine principles. They are all divorced from anything physical. We just had that whole discussion. And now what I'm going to do is look at, to sort of teach you or train you to figure out or understand what these principles feel like and what the traits are for each one. Because as coaches, we're going to need to be able to do that. You're going to have a coachee come in, and I'll give you a little demonstration after we talk about these signs. You're going to have a coachee come in, and they're going to present to you themselves and a dilemma. And both of those will have somewhere that will have some balance between being and doing, and it will be somewhat off, right? So what we need to train you guys for is to be able to analyze that and to see that and to look at that. And what I'm going to show you now are some feminine or being-based signs. So here we have, for example, the painting of the birth of Aphrodite. Aphrodite is the Greek, and Venus is the Roman. If you think about the story of how Aphrodite was born, right? Saturn, Cronus, had a fight with his father, Uranus, and he used a scythe to slice off his scrotum, and the scrotum fell from the sky into the ocean. And there were two fluids in the scrotum. There was blood and there was semen, and the blood became the Furies, and the semen became Aphrodite. She's from the foam of the sea, right? And you see here the shell, right? A shell is like, almost looks like a labia, almost like looks like the vaginal area. And these symbols, and you see a feminine body, another feminine or being-based symbol. Mythology is going to be a source of a lot of what we give you here, because mythology is directly from the unconscious. Humans, since before we were humans, have been telling stories. And when we make up stories, remember how the archetypes give rise to images and the images give rise to ideas. Well, the ideas, we tell stories about the ideas. So a lot of the characters in mythology are archetypes. They are the embodiment of archetypes, and you get to see how the archetypes function. So here is an example of a being-based archetype. This one, you see a symbol is a cave. And a cave is analogous to a uterus, a feminine organ that holds and produces a baby. And that is a major being-based symbol. I kind of want to sort of teach you guys to think about this. Anytime you see a container, something that contains, something that has space inside of it, space that's useful, space that does something, that is a being-based symbol. Okay, so we will see some other symbols like this, or signs like this, as we go through these slides. So here's the first one, your cave. The other thing about the cave is that it is inside the earth. And that's the other thing I want you to look for as a watch out, right? Things that have earth or are in the earth or come up out of the earth, they tend to be being-based symbols, because the base that provides all of us the sustenance that we have to stay alive, right, is the Mother Earth, is the earth. So the earth is like the ultimate being-based symbol. Here is a jar, a pottery jar, an earthenware jar. And this kind of comes at it from two ends, right? Because ding, 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 container, it's a container, being-based symbol or sign, being-based sign, but also it's literally made from earth, right? When you do pottery, what do you start with? Mud, earth. So that is a being-based sign. Honeybee. Honeybee is another good one. This is in particular a worker bee. And you may or may not know this, but in nature, all worker bees are female. So you have the female worker bee. This is also, there's agricultural aspects to this, because you're creating or producing honey that we use. And there's also a flower in this picture, right? And flowers are the sex organs of the female sex organs of the plant. They actually both, they're hermaphroditic, but they are thought to produce the seed. They are known to produce the seed. So flowers have traditionally been a being-based symbol as well. A washing machine or a dryer, maybe. This is kind of to sort of train you and get you thinking. When you look at this, you see container. Now, there are some masculine or doing-based principles involved with this, right? You do have a keypad and a place where you've got to deal with information. You're putting information out, you're taking information in, there's an interface there. That is a doing-based type of principle. But really, you have the ultimate piece in this picture is the cave, where you put the clothing, the container. So we're containing. Once again, this should be getting easy by now. You have these beautiful earthenware teacups. So you have the earth, they're literally made from earth, they're containers. They're also used in a ritual where someone is providing tea for another, providing, supporting. Now, this is a chef making a dish. And if you're really thinking sharply here, you might say, you know, Josh, most chefs are actually male. Yeah. But the profession of cooking is process based. It is a process. You have to remember a long series of steps and be patient and do them one after another in the correct order. And there's an art to it. I mean, do you put in this amount of sugar or a little bit more? You know, so you can actually mess with the process a little bit. That is a very being-based profession. Even though it tends to have more males in it, it is a very being-based profession because of the process. So that's another key word there for you to think about when it comes to being-based things. We had container, we had earth, but also process. Things that involve process. Alexandra, go ahead.
I was just wondering whether to share this, but I have this kind of fetish, so to say, to collect cups and mugs. So I'm really looking forward to this module. When I saw all these teacups, it was like, oh wow. So yeah, let's see what comes next.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we don't analyze things in coaching, but if there was a Jungian analyst that was talking to you, they might ask you about that and ask you, what is it about your feminine principle, your being-based principle? Yeah, very cool. A tree, a fruit tree. All right. So being-based principle for the earth, because we have something, a plant here that's being supported from the earth, but also there's fruit, and the fruit provides sustenance. The fruit supports people who eat it. And that is a being-based principle. Now, this one might throw you off because you might say, aha, a tractor, that's a doing-based item there, right? It's a doing-based object. We're gonna plow the earth, except that really this is about the earth. Agriculture is about the earth. That's a very being-based principle. If you look at all the agricultural deities throughout history, right? Who do you have? You have Ceres, you have Demeter, you have female goddesses, female deities, being-based principle. Because agriculture is really about bringing forth sustenance from the earth. And if you talk to farmers who tend to be male, they actually are pretty in touch with the earth. They can tell you about soil and quality of soil. They can tell you more than you want to know about dirt. The earth.
And fertility as well.
And fertility, yes. And the farmers who do animal husbandry, who raise animals, right? Right, AJ? They know all about the mating rituals of those animals and how to make them make more babies and the fertility, be more fertile, and produce more milk, that kind of thing. So it is very much a being-based principle when it comes to agriculture. Okay, so those are the being-based principles, the signs for them. We're going to look at the doing-based signs now, and you're going to see a contrast. Theodora, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask why is a process more feminine? Because I perceive it more as masculine.
Yeah, so the process is, so you might think about it as masculine because you have to perform steps and you have to like do the steps in order and they have to be done exactly the same right way every time. That is more about discipline and that is masculine. But a process is more like it's more a being-based principle because it takes patience and it takes time and you can't rush it. You have to use the time and you have to wait for things and you have to be patient and you support them as they go. So once the doing based people or the doing based energy comes in and dictates, okay, you got to do this, this, and this, and this, they kind of leave, right? Then you have to sit there and do it, and you have to patiently oversee the process. So it can be that's why it's a doing based I'm sorry, a being based item. Alexandra, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to see what Theodore asked about. Can it maybe be that we are seeing the process as feminine based because it's like the creation of a new like life, you know, of something new, whereas the masculine doing, it can be doing, but not necessarily in the form of creating something, you know, a third, some kind of a, I don't know, whatever. It can just be the doing, but not with the outcome of creation, but with the outcome of something else.
Yeah, good
Can
point.
that be the-
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thanks.
Yeah, good job. Stephanie.
I'm curious, I might be jumping ahead. You know, when we're identifying the signs and we're able to see someone is you know, leaning more feminine or being, you know, for example, I'm underdeveloped masculine, and I wasn't surprised at that. Is in coaching the purpose to just notice that, or like would you be able to try and change it or compensate? I'm just wondering because I find it very hard to like keep to structure, keep to punctuality. And someone had said maybe you have an underdeveloped masculine, and then the results came out, and I was very balance is quite different. So yeah.
So these things we'll find are not about good or bad, or you know, you're underdeveloped in something you shouldn't be. It's not really a cut and dry black and white thing like that. It's about, in coaching, it's about the situation. Okay. If someone is coming at this from a point of view that is too doing based, all right, we're going to use the compensatory principle and we're going to coach them from a being based perspective, because then they're going to bring that into balance. But we're also going to make sure we understand make sure the coachee understands what the appropriate response is to their dilemma. So it's not about one is bad and you got to be the other one. It's about, in coaching, it's about what is the appropriate response? What response are you doing right now? Or what response do you have right now? And what response do you want to have? What response would help you to be the best in this situation? And it's going to be a different answer for every different aspect in your life. In some aspects of your life, you're going to want to apply more doing-based principles. And in some aspects of your life, you're going to want to be applying more being-based principles. There is no like overall war that you have to win somehow and be more of the other or anything like that. It's very situationally based, each little individual situation.
Just a follow-on question. So then based on Jung's theory, and you know, you're kind of identifying what you identify more with. Is that just as is? And you know, then you apply the doing and being principles to different situations. He's not trying to change anything in anyone.
He's not trying to change anyone, but there's also becoming better for the sake of becoming better, the process of individuation. All right. So if we're talking about individuation, then the idea there is not, the idea there is to become more conscious of your balance and be able to have the balance that you want to have.
Yeah.
In each situation. There is no, you're going to have both being and doing principles within you. You're going to be either unconscious of them or conscious of them. And that's going to be either appropriate or inappropriate in each individual situation. And somebody who individuates can work with that more appropriately and be more conscious of it and do the right thing at the right time.
Perfect.
I had no problem. Deanna, I had Deanna next.
Yeah, I'm like kind of Theodora. The chef example threw me off a little bit, but as I'm hearing you talking, I'm thinking of the chef as it's a process, as the feminine aspect, and then executing the process into action is the masculine, you know, because there are a lot of people who very creative or they are very good at creating plans and processing things, you know, like for other people. But when it comes to actually execute that on themselves or do that, they're not able to. So I'm wondering if in situations, in those kind of situations, there has to be, you know, like the feminine and the masculine balance, like you said, because if someone has the feminine, they would be just creative and sitting in la la land all the time, or they're just going to be doing.
You know how when you look at the yin yang symbol,
Mhm.
in the black area, there's a little dot of white, and in
And
the
the white area, yeah,
every,
it's part of the other.
correct. Everything has a little bit of its opposite in it. And when we talk later about the stages of anima growth and the stages of animus growth, you'll find that even when you get to the higher stages of these being and doing principles developing in them, you start to sort of turn into the other one at the top.
Yeah, yeah. That's why when we were talking about the chef, I'm kind of like felt a
Yeah.
little bit confused and
Yeah,
had
yeah.
my thought. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good segue. We'll get into that later. But
Okay.
yes, so I'm glad you're thinking about this. You're thinking deeply here. Did you have another question or?
Oh, no, I'm all set. Thank you.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay. All right.
Just,
So
I'm not sure where my hand raising button is. I just want to just make note that although when we started, we said, well, it doesn't matter what your physical characteristics are, there is a tendency to be talking about already gender and sexual characteristics. And just we have this pull, I know it lives in myself, about when talking with people, working with people, that it can be like, oh, this person is male identified and they must have more masculine characteristics. It's just a slippery slope I just want to identify. We're already talking about gender and sexual
yeah,
characteristics in relation to masculine and feminine.
I'm trying to be aware of that. But if I make a mistake and I slip, then definitely let me know, that you feel a certain way about that.
Oh, yeah. And I don't, it's not about making anybody wrong. It's just about noticing that when we're talking about Aphrodite and we're talking about female sexual characteristics, that it's just sort of baked in. It's baked into this lens that we're looking through.
Absolutely, it is. You're right. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, so we're gonna, with that lens. Oh, Alexandra, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just to say that I think what Cliff Wright said just, I mean, it's not that anyone here is has some kind of malicious intentions. It's just like it's the way things have been, for culturally and for centuries. So it's kind of maybe someone will, we can all understand or experience things, same things in a different way. So just not to confuse that, in case that you feel somehow, I don't know, like offended or something. It's nothing on purpose. It's just like how we understand things, how we have perceived them. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, the object isn't to be perfect. The object is to be better. So we're going to try to know better and do better here. And you notice me trying to explain things as being principles and doing principles instead of always saying feminine. So know better, do better. But yes, absolutely. So we're going to look at some of the doing based signs. And first one, calculator. All right, because calculators calculate, right? So calculation, crunching numbers. When we had AJ look at the breakdown of the numbers of green and red, we had to calculate them. So that was a very doing based principle. Skyscraper. Now this picture has a couple of things in it. First off, you have a skyscraper, right? That's like almost like a phallic symbol, where it is penetrating a sky. And sky and air are doing based principles. The air element is a doing based type element along with fire, right? And guess what the other ones are? The being based ones. I already mentioned earth, but also on earth, you have the sea and the ocean, which is water. So earth and water are your being-based elements, and air and fire are your doing-based elements. So whenever you see that light, sky, penetration, can't really help it. There's a phallic symbol, phallic items. Start thinking doing-based. Alexandra, go ahead.
Sorry for interrupting you, but
No.
I can't help myself. But I think, like, since another Alexandra mentioned that she has collection of cups, mugs.
Yep.
Well, I
Yeah.
have collections of pens, but I mean pen, like this old-fashioned pen. I don't know how it's in English.
Yeah, pens.
The
are-
one we think. Yeah. So I was thinking, well, okay, that's obviously masculine principle. Well, it's phallic symbol, sharp, blah, blah, blah. But inside is actually a container for the ink.
Yeah.
So you don't have to, we don't have to talk about this now, but just to have this thought, because many things are actually combined from. And then what is the purpose? Well, yeah, actually, who writes more? Probably women. So anyway, it was just a thought. So how do we actually interpret such symbols? Because I guess coaches or clients, they never come with the clean pictures like this or that,
That's
this or
right.
that. So that was my thought on this.
I would say, so first off, remember when I was talking to Diana, and we'll see this in the symbol, that we were saying that the yin yang symbol, each side has a little bit of the opposite in it. So your masculine pen that writes, and it's straight, it's a line, but it has a container inside of it. There's a being based principle inside of the container. That's just like the yin yang symbol, where you have black yin, and then there's a dot of active yang in there, or you have active yang with a dot of being inside of it, dot of black. So nothing is pure because nothing can be pure. Everything is a combination of both. If you analyze it long enough, you'll get there. And that's true of coaches as well. All right. And I wouldn't worry about it, because what we're going to teach you to do is we're going to teach you to analyze a person's dilemma as being or doing, and we're going to teach you to analyze the person's traits as being or doing. But if you're wrong, it'll correct itself in the coaching session, and you'll be okay.
Sorry, just one more question. Are we also going to learn how to actually assess if the approach to the dilemma solution is more being or doing, or masculine or feminine?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Look at another symbol. We have here a hot air balloon. Couple of items in here. Once again, you have sky and air. You also have fire in there, because there's a fire that makes the air hot. So there's your two elements of air and fire. So that is a masculine sign. You have Go ahead, going back.
Sorry to interrupt. How about the idea of travel?
Yes, travel. Good one.
Like an adventurous.
Yes,
characteristic that,
going from one place to another with speed. So travel and speed are another doing-based principle. If you're definitely doing something if you're traveling. What else, AJ? Anything else you want to add there?
I want.
Not really. But
okay, who else?
I want. I'm sorry, but this balloon is actually a huge container.
Yeah, because once again, nothing is pure, and once again, inside the yang symbol is a dot of black. Isn't it interesting how everything kind of fits together and goes together? All right, and look at this dude, right? Very masculine in every sense of the word, right? you would say a lot of doing principles. So the idea of physical activity and physical exercise is a doing based item. But look here. Remember how there was a feminine item in the hot air balloon, and then the example of the fountain pen. What's the feminine thing you can see in this picture? What is it?
The tattoos?
The what?
Can I see?
Tattoos?
Olga, go ahead.
Sorry, Alexandra. I was thinking about maybe process.
Bodybuilding is a process. Yes, that would be a very being-based item thing. Yes. But I want to point out one other thing. Look here. See that? His pectoral muscle, when it gets to a certain point, it basically becomes almost like to resemble a breast, right? So there's a duality in there, right? You get strong enough, you get high enough up in that physical activity, and there's at the highest levels of the doing-based principles, there's being-based things. The Pope has a hat here that is pointing to the sky, and that is a masculine principle, right? The sky, once again, it's on the same principle also as like a skyscraper. He is himself an authority, agency. So authority and agency are doing-based principles, right? Someone who rules or makes laws, makes rules, tells people what to do. Those are doing-based principles. In fact, this hat has a pretty interesting little history to it. It actually dates back to Dagon, I believe a Mesopotamian fish god, where the priests of Dagon used to have these hats that were a fish. I think they had the whole body of the fish kind of in cloth or preserved, as part of the hat. And then if you look at sideways, the Pope's hat is still this same shape. They worship the same thing. Now, what's interesting though is that, again, we're talking about nothing is pure. He's agency, he's ruling, but the fish itself is providing sustenance, right? Fish tend to be a being-based principle thing because they provide sustenance, they feed people. So there's kind of a combination there in both principles.
And the hat actually looks like a container.
Yeah, and the hat you can kind of see a little bit of a container in there. Yeah. Yep. An oil rig, a machine. Machines are very much an embodiment of doing-based principles. And you're looking at people working to do what? They're drilling for oil. So we're penetrating the earth, which is the concept of penetration, penetrating the earth in order to extract oil. So that is a doing-based principle. Writing. When you write, it has to be precise in order for people to read it. You look at the calligraphy here, they got all these little swizzles and everything going on. It's very, very precise. And writing conveys ideas. So ideas, the conveyance of ideas, is a doing-based principle. I'm intellectualizing. I'm putting things out there. I'm not just letting them be. I'm changing them with my ideas. Rubik's Cube, right? A Rubik's Cube, you have to sit there and try to figure it out. Figuring things out, contemplating things. You're doing something. It's a doing-based principle. A sword. Now, swords are a very interesting sign because they do a number of things, like they cut literally. So you can talk about doing that. You can talk about the actual principle of cutting, even though we'll talk about later how war is more being-based principle. Swords also symbolize analysis. When you're analyzing something, you're separating out the wheat from the chaff. You're separating out the ideas from each other. You're differentiating things. You're putting a dividing line between them. You're cutting. Swords are about analysis in the psyche. When I was training as a Jungian coach in this same school, and we had to do symbolic thinking. Remember your symbolic thinking module, module 1. We had to come up with an image and coach on it and get coached on it. And I came up with the image of a sword because I was having a dilemma at the time about leaving a company, and I had to figure out, I had to be able to analyze, I had to be able to separate. So it's sword was what came up for me. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, may I ask, isn't a sword also a symbol for knowledge? And isn't knowledge a doing-based principle to gather knowledge?
Yep, absolutely. When you're gathering knowledge, you're figuring things out, you're going and you're getting the knowledge, and it's an active-based, doing-based principle. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Speed. All right. That guy's fast. It's about speed, running a race. So speed is a doing-based principle. So when we talk about doing things fast, not with patience, not with process, but doing them now, we're talking about speed. But we're also talking, remember when AJ referred to travel. So when we're going from one place to another and we're going with speed, we are in the doing space here. All right, so we did this questionnaire and we came out to have a doing-based type class. And what I want to do now here, so we kind of got some basics. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Go ahead, Dana.
I just had a question for what AJ has mentioned. How is knowledge and seeking knowledge is doing? Isn't what you do with this knowledge is doing, or
You have to go get it. Knowledge requires going out and getting it, and it's an active process. You have to study.
Okay.
It doesn't just come to you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Wisdom, you could argue, is a being-based, right? Because wisdom is what have you gathered from just being there and seeing it a lot, right?
Wisdom is what you gathered from doing first.
It could be, yeah. It just kind of wisdom kind of happens. You can't just seek wisdom or buy wisdom or get wisdom, but you can buy knowledge. You can go get knowledge.
Well, wisdom does not happen, you know, because we would have been all wise people by now, you know, like, but
wisdom doesn't happen.
Wisdom happens when you do, from my perspective, you know, like when you do a lot of inner work, so you seek knowledge about yourself, about the world. So it's also doing.
But it's almost like a side effect of it.
Sorry?
Yeah, but
go ahead.
Yeah, I just got an idea that Dana, you're probably I'm thinking that you're referring to experience, and once you get experience, you get like wisdom, and that's like inner experience, whereas knowledge comes from, for example, doing, you know, scientific research or doing rational thinking or rational data gathering. That's how you get knowledge.
Yeah, that's a good way
that's
as experience.
Yeah.
So, but experience comes from doing. You don't get experience.
Well,
experience comes from doing. In other words, it's a side effect of doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Alexandra.
I was actually going to ask about contemplating, because when we contemplate, we are not going anywhere. We are actually digesting our experiences and knowledge we get somewhere to acquire. So it's a process now. So isn't it actually being feminine?
Don't forget there's different types of contemplation, right? And you've gone to different kinds of, let's say, meditation classes. There are guided meditations where someone is telling you what to do and what to see. And then there are other kinds of meditations where you're not doing anything, you're just being. So if contemplation and meditation can be active doing based processes, sure, but they could also be being based processes if you're not directing the contemplation anywhere in particular.
Okay.
These are great questions. All right, so what we can do now, we have a little bit of time. I want to maybe give you an idea of what this will look like at the end when you've done the 3 days. Let's do a coaching. All right, so if I have a volunteer who has a dilemma, who would be volunteer to be coached by me, we can do this and it'll be in front of the class. And we'll call it about maybe like a 20-minute session. Deanna, are you volunteering?
Yeah, I can volunteer.
Okay, awesome. Let me just pin you here so I can see you. All right, so and I'm going to follow, I'm restricting myself to the methods of what we're learning here today, just to say, and I'm going to follow the steps so you guys can see them about how this actually works with the being and doing. Okay, so Diana, hi.
Hey.
I'm Josh and I'm a Jungian coach, and what's on your mind today?
What's on my mind is what I've been working lately on figuring out, am I doing too much or am I being too much? I can't find the fine line and what I need.
Okay.
I'm a little confused. And this class started this process and somehow confused me in certain aspects and somehow, like it kind of makes sense. So that's my dilemma, finding the fine line between where I am now, between doing and being.
So the finding the line between doing and being is a very wide, broad thing to talk about. Would there be a particular area, or what particular area of your life do you feel that you want to focus on here with being and doing?
Yeah, so with the person I'm working, or they with the group that I'm working, they mentioned that I'm doing a lot, like I'm doing a lot of classes, so I'm not being. So I'm seeking a lot of knowledge without being, but at the same time with being, one of the suggestions is going out to the nature, taking walks with the dogs, but this is now it's doing. So that's what I'm not able to move forward with it. So I don't know what's being, what's doing here.
So, I mean, you seem to have given me a good description of what being is doing but when I hear you talk about, so you're doing classes, you're seeking knowledge, but then you're being told, or your friends tell you to go do other stuff like go being in nature. It sounds like you have trouble doing that, or can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I do have trouble doing that.
Okay. So if you were to state this dilemma about your trouble in like one sentence, could you do that? What would it be?
I want to be in the being state more than the doing state.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to put up some cards here. And just a quick note to everybody, you're going to have these cards if you don't already. These slides should have been emailed to you. I'm going to share my screen. I want you, if you can, to pick a number between 2 and 25.
Say 7.
Did you say 7? You said 7?
Yes.
All right, here we go. So there's that black text there. I'm going to make it a little bigger for you here. Would you care to read that for me?
Use your imagination while thinking about this problem. What image do you see? Why does this always comes to me?
What word is always coming to you?
Imagination.
Imagination. Okay. So we're in a Jungian coaching process here, right? And one of the things we can do, if you're interested, is we can speak with imagination. How would you feel about that?
Yes.
Okay, so here's how it worked. Do you guys remember dialogue? So we're going to have Diana on one side, and we're going to have imagination on the other side. And are you familiar with dialogue, or do you want me to describe it for you?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar.
Okay, so we're going to put Diana on one side. We can start with Diana. And Diana, with regard to your dilemma of wanting to be more, what would you want to ask imagination as your opening question?
Okay, what image comes to me when I'm thinking of being?
You're asking that?
Yeah, what image comes to me if I want to be in the being state?
Okay, being says.
And being says,
Now I say, because you are being.
oh, I say eagle.
Diana says.
Why eagle? Because it's flying free. Cannot be restricted.
Repeat that 3 times.
Because it's flying free and cannot be restricted. Because it's flying free and cannot be restricted.
Diana says.
Blanked out.
I'm sorry?
Blanked out.
You blanked out. You don't know what to ask?
Yeah, like like instant, like I feel like instantly shut down.
Okay, come to the center. So imagination said it showed you an eagle, and it said because it's flying and it's free. What insights do you get from that?
That being is freeing.
What if we talk to the eagle?
Yeah, I was trying to talk to the eagle.
So being was already as the eagle?
Yeah.
And the idea is being saying it's about being free. So where does the blank come from then?
Just I didn't know what to ask the eagle further. It's just like I felt complete like blank. Like before it was like coming up, like the image and the questions, and then I don't know what was the last question. I
was just trying to figure out what the eagles. Do you want to? Let's do this. I'm going to have you pick another card, okay?
Okay.
Except I'm going to do it this way. Pick a number between 2 and 25.
Between 2 and 25?
Yep.
25. Let's do 3.
3. Okay. Let me what do you see there?
How can self-discipline help you in overcoming this challenge? Yeah, I guess that's why I blanked. Because self-discipline.
So what do you think about speaking with self-discipline?
I can already feel the resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Between who and who?
Between Diana and self-resistance.
Okay.
And self-discipline.
Okay. Self-discipline, so does that, on a scale of 1 to 5, how enthusiastic would you be about talking to self-discipline?
Being 5 is like very enthusiastic, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm not enthusiastic at all about talking to self-discipline.
You're not enthusiastic about at all, like a 1.
Yes.
What so like that could be that resistance could be because the problem is there and we don't want to look at it, or it could be because it just has nothing to do with anything here and it's just not relevant whatsoever. Which one of those do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I think the blank, I knew deeper inside that I have to force myself of being, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. And now that card came up to me like just a slam in my face,
Yeah.
which is crazy. Yeah, it's I know it's a self-discipline, but I don't know like why I'm resisting the self-discipline of being, like put myself in a being state, but rather always doing.
And what would happen if you asked self-discipline that?
Oh, it's probably gonna go down the rabbit hole.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you want what can help you here?
Um, I guess there is a guilt of being here.
Okay, what do you mean?
Like just being, like give that guilt that I should be doing, not being.
Yeah, so there's like you feel guilty for being, what would that be? Does that feel like something that we could talk to this guilt? We could talk to the guilt of being. How enthusiastic would you feel about that?
I can do that.
You want to do that? Okay. All right, so you have Diana on one side and your guilt of being on the other side. What's your opening question?
Oh Lord. I'm not coming with anything.
Well, you said some good things to me. What about being and your guilt and how you feel guilty about being? What are some questions from there? Or even just, hey, how can you help me? Guilt, or what are you here for?
Why you're here, guilt?
Guilt says.
Guilt says,
I say.
I say, I am here I have been here for a long time and I'm here now to throwing temper tantrum so you can acknowledge me and
Repeat that 3 times.
I'm here throwing a temper tantrum so you can acknowledge me. I'm here throwing a temper tantrum so you can acknowledge me. And but I acknowledged you all my life and I don't like you. Well, you gotta like me because you're here because of me. I don't like you. I just want you to disappear. Just like disappear. Well, obviously wanting me to disappear has not been working. So you probably have to be smarter and find another way.
Repeat that 3 times.
Obviously, wanting me to disappear, to just disappear is not working. So you gotta find another way. Obviously, wanting me to disappear has not been working, and you gotta find another way.
Diana says.
Well, tell me, because I don't know any other way.
Guilt says.
I don't know how to teach you to find another way. You gotta do it on your own. I'm just here. And I'm gonna be clinging on you until you find a way.
Diana, one more question for Guilt. If you want to ask it, can you ask Guilt who can help you figure out a way?
Who can help me figure it out? And Guilt says,
I say.
I'll say, well, you're already doing it, trying to figure out where I'm coming from and how. And this class that you're taking is already taking steps, so you are doing it. You just need time to figure it out.
You want to come to the center? What are you feeling?
I don't feel guilty about taking this class.
Good.
So I'm figuring out how to be by doing, by still doing.
Yeah. Sounds tough. What did you get out of this session, if anything?
I do actually feel lighter.
Good.
Yeah, does feel lighter. I was put in that situation where stop doing, just go meditate, just go to the nature, just go, like, and I was like always feeling, oh my God, I have a class, shit, like I have to go to the class, like, but it's me who signed up for the class, like, and I never realized that underlying reason was actually okay, and I'm okay to be with doing. And not feeling guilty about both.
Bravo. Now, if this was a full coaching session, we would talk about actions, right? Because we have to do ICF principles. We would develop actions, and we would talk about what you would do about this. But how do you feel about ending it right here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. So before we do anything, and I tell you about the mechanics of that, I want acknowledgements for Diana. So please, anyone who wants to speak and acknowledge Diana, please do so now. I'll give you a few moments. Just go right ahead. Alexandra, go for it.
Diana, thank you very much for this. This is very brave. And I'm sure you have the support of whole group for this. And you also gave us an excellent example. And also thank you, Josh, for showing us the technique. There are things that, of course, we were missing. So I think at least I learned something very new.
Yep, just go ahead. Lead up, Lital.
Okay. Yes. Can you see me? I can't see. Yes. Okay. Perfect. I think it was, I will say that there's a say that the process is much stronger than the content. I mean, and this is what I felt during this session, because in the beginning, I really sensed your challenge of be, the fact that you were doing it and you were kind of blocked. But through the process, you let yourself be. Okay, so this is what come to my mind. Be, it's not just, meditate or taking a time off. I mean, it's kind of losing control in a way, being less structured, less restrict. This is my thoughts and insight, and I think you were very brave, and I could see the process that you are going through, just in these, a few minutes. I think that there was totally different dynamic between how you started and how, this session ended. And first, you are brave for doing it and letting yourself, be. And second, great example and session. So thank you for that. Yes.
Yes,
And,
thank you.
I'd like to add to that. Also, it's really brave to do. So I find it very difficult doing this with an audience. And I think it's really amazing to be able to get so deeply into it, with a bunch of people watching you. Because it definitely doesn't, I find it doesn't help. But anyway, so thank you for that. And sort of letting it unfold through the sticky moments. In fact, to both of you, because there are sticky moments, aren't there? And I find that practicing on people, knowing how to hold those sticky moments and just keep breathing and having a strong faith that they're leading to something is it's just really heartening to witness it and and be able to see it and not be the coach or the coachee and go, oh, okay, this is normal, this is how it works. It's like giving birth. It's like got stages and there's bits where you think, oh, what's happening? But yeah, so thanks for letting that unfold.
What?
Yeah, thank you, Diana, so much for bringing a real issue and letting us feel you're grappling with it. It's very courageous. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Diana, for letting us be with you in this. It must have been really tough. It takes a lot of time, I think, to create a secure base, because you cannot approach such a deep issue without feeling safe. It takes time. So, and I think it was a great thing that you sort of started confronting your discipline area. That I think in coaching and in life in general, I think it's great that you start asking questions like, why are you with me? Like, why do you torment me? Or do you have some message for me? Or why do you keep coming back to me every now and then? And you started asking those questions, and that takes you forward, I think. So it was great to witness you doing that. So thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question when you let me ask the guilt. Why is it here? What is it here to teach you? That was the thing that I feel like it triggered something, because I felt like I was going into a dead end. I was going through the rabbit hole, and I really didn't want to go through the rabbit hole in this class now. So I was like, okay, that was a great question. Yeah, thank you.
Teresa, did you want to say anything?
I would like to say just briefly
Yeah,
something.
go ahead.
Yeah. It was useful for me when Diana said that now she feels actually lighter, and so that when we are just like beginning with coaching or something, that was what I found useful, because one sees that it's not always about the end result, like something that you can actually like do, but that the process can actually be also helpful without having like, I don't know, some kind of a epiphany, or I don't know which kind of a breakthrough, but so that even in the process of just contemplating, that can help the client as well. So yeah, I found that, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Diana.
Yeah, I have a, oh, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
please, go
No,
ahead.
I just I have a question for Josh, and it can wait. It's okay.
Okay. Diana, thank you so much for being so brave to be a coach in front of everyone else. You beautifully transitioned from doing to being, as Other mentioned, and you faced your guilt. It's not easy to face our guilt and have a dialogue with that. And you did it, and it was a great experience for myself as well, because, as a modern woman, that's a dilemma of a lot of us, being in a doing position and don't know how to be. And I had the same dilemma, like even my being was doing. And it took me like a journey to figure out how I can be. So thank you.
Alexandra, what was your question?
Well, my question actually comes right onto Paris' reflection, because I've noted, but it is actually a question for you as our trainer, as our teacher. So there was a moment when Diana said, I mean, she was talking, she said, and then I tell myself, or something like this, go meditate. Like, go, it's a being true masculine principle. And my question for you is, because that's like the whole the whole new process opening during the coaching session. And I struggle with this because I'm more into the psychotherapy. So I know what would I do in psychotherapy with this. But here we have limited time. This is a new process. This is actually the block of the whole side of her. So I would just like, if it's too early, it's okay. I mean, we can do this later. But just how do we approach this?
I was going to give a little, actually, I wanted to get your permission first, Diana. Do I have your permission to just analyze our session?
Oh, absolutely, please. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yes, so I was restricted to the being and doing tools in this coaching session because this is a being and doing training, okay? So if this was me coaching, there was evidence of shadow in her process, because remember when she talked to the guilt, she's like, I hate you, right? That right there is an alarm bell usually for shadow. When you have an emotional reaction to something that's greater than it should be, great, then that's an indication of shadow. So I probably would have gone into the shadow module from module 1. Okay. That's the first thing. The second thing is we don't correct. We don't fix. We're not psychotherapists, we're coaches. So if Diana believes that her process is to go do the being, your opinion on that, like whether that works or whether that doesn't work, is like, you got to let her do it. That's her process. She's going to learn from that. No, either way. So you let her go with that. And so that hopefully that answers your question. Did I answer?
Yes, I mean the biggest part of it. Yes.
Okay. So then just kind of going backward to the session. So I tried to figure out whether her dilemma is more being or doing. And she comes up to me with a dilemma where it's like, yeah, I'm on the line between being and doing, and I don't know. And I'm like, oh crap. Right? What do I pick? And if you noticed, we picked imagination, which was something for her, but it wasn't it. It wasn't the thing. So I was wrong. And then we picked self-discipline, and it was a thing. We weren't wrong, but she didn't want to go into it. So I didn't force her. This is the coachee setting the agenda. We don't force the coachees to talk about things that they don't want to talk about. How enthusiastic are you? Scale of 1 to 5? She said 1. Okay. Not going to do it. But then notice what my question was after that. What could help you here? Okay, if you don't want to talk about that, what can we talk about? What can help you? And then she brought up the guilt of being. All right, kind of a very being-based item. So, oh, okay, well, there's something. And then we had a conversation with that, and we realized that there was some shadow elements there. So, we can't touch that with this, but we did as much as we could with these cards. Understand? All right.
I'm just
Yes.
interested in the. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Imogen. Just another thing. We just freshly finished the module 2, and we were loudly warned that we shouldn't actually remind client for the previous session, and that's fine. I got this. But I mean, here we have a process. We cannot even hope that it should be solved. I mean, in one session. I got that we shouldn't remind her, but what should we do? I mean, shall we just let her bring it again through some other content? I mean, any client, they can be anything.
I have a question that I ask that's pretty standard to every client in the beginning. And the question, you may want to write this down, is what would you like to do today or continue from before? Understand? Now they choose. You got me?
Yes, but they told us not to even mention the previous session. I mean, if I'm wrong, let group correct me, but that was my point. That we kind of have a boundary around it, and sometimes,
So you can so I didn't notice. I didn't say, oh, last time we talked about A, B, and C, and do you want to talk about that? I didn't. I asked a very open-ended question. What would you like to do? What would you like to talk about today or continue from before? They could continue from before, to them could mean anything. Continue from 1 session ago, from 10 sessions ago, whatever they want. But it does give them the option to continue. So I use that question a lot. Diana.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my question now is about our topic on this model, the anima and animus. In that session that we did today, are we supposed to see where the client is more on anima or more on animus? Because where it came from is that I didn't know if my animus is dominating or my anima is dominating, because there is a lot of doing and not being, but at the same time, I'm lacking a lot of doing initiative, so I'm like overdoing on some aspect of animus, but not on the other, just one thing. So So where does it fall here from where we just studied the characters about anima and animus?
Well, if I was correct in remembering your scores, you had more of a being-based score, a higher score in being, right?
That's exactly my question because I scored on higher in being, but my problem is on being.
Right. So you had a being-based, you have a being-based personality, or you're presenting me with being-based personality, and then you had a doing-based dilemma. So I thought, so first I went at it with being cards because I addressed your dilemma with the compensation principle, went at the opposite. So that went nowhere, and that's kind of the thing with coaching. You try things, and if it doesn't work, you just try the next thing. You just breathe, like they said, you know, in your feedback. You breathe and you try the next thing. But the analysis of that was very quick, and it took place in the beginning. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. Don't worry about it, because it's like Jung says, it's like we know all this theory, but when we actually go to treat somebody, because he treated people, forget it all and just dance in the moment and do your thing. And that is, I started out with the analysis, and then I let you kind of take the lead because the coachee sets the agenda.
Okay, so you went and chose first the being cards based on my dilemma,
Yes,
not based on my score. Because
correct.
okay. So if you would look at the score, so you would see that, okay, the masculine is lower, so maybe that then she's lacking the doing. Would you go straight to the doing cards and work from that, or we had to go through that process?
It depends on your dilemma. Your personal score just tells me more about how I'm expecting you to react and think about things. But your dilemma is where we use the compensating principle. We go at the dilemma with the opposite.
With the opposite.
Mhm.
Okay. It just one last piece, just to understand where I'm at, you know, like, so my masculine score is low, but I'm complaining of high doing, high level of doing. How does that?
Because we're gonna go over that more tomorrow, that it's not a black or white thing. There's actually many pieces to your masculinity and femininity, or your being and doing principles, and there's some of them are developed and some of them are not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not cut and dry. Imogen, one last question here, because I want to get you guys into a breakout.
Oh, just two things about the cards. So the physical cards are not numbered. So you say pick a number. Would I just go pick a card, like in a card trick, like pick any card?
My preference is that if you you have a card deck and you ask them to pick a number between 1 and 25, and then you just count that many cards off the top.
Okay. Okay. And just quick second question. You describing the session said that when you came up with imagination, you were wrong, but you didn't come up with it. She picked that card. So my question is anything ever really wrong? I mean,
nothing is ever really wrong. They
Yeah.
always pick things for a reason. That's right.
Yeah.
It just happened to not be the one that she felt
It
like.
didn't.
Yeah, it didn't take.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Malika, go ahead. One last question.
Yes, thank you. So thank you from both of you. Just a question. I mean, can you make the same exercise with a picture? I mean, if you make Diana think about a picture and she just make like dialogue with the picture, can you just guess from the picture that she's choosing that she's more doing and being?
Absolutely. So remember, you have your symbolic thinking module, module 1, and in module 1 we talked about making pictures, and you can absolutely go that way. And I could have gone that way, and I thought about going that way actually when she had this image of the eagle, but we're restricted to the cards for this module, so I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Parisa, if you could set up groups of 2, please, for the breakout. I'll give you a couple minutes. And yes, I'm going to give you guys a 5-minute bio for the breakouts, and then we're going to do like 15-minute breakouts just real quick. Okay, so be back at 18 past the hour, please. Parisa, I'm here with you to make the breakouts if you need, and I'm going to stop the recording. All right, that was the end of the first breakout, so we're going to lunch. Let's be back in 1 hour. So that would be 1:36 Eastern US time and 7:36 Central European time. and enjoy. Okay, we still have a few people just coming back on camera, but let's get started. You should be able to see my screen. We're going to continue on with the being and doing principles here, give you more details, more understanding of this, and then I'm going to give you the steps to coaching using these principles. I'm going to write them out with you. And then we're going to let one of you try, but not for like an hour or so. We're going to let one of you try to coach somebody using these principles. So start thinking about that. Or if you have a dilemma that you want to bring up, we'll have a breakout room, and then that's going to be about it for the day. So we have a lot of slides to get through. So let's get going. So this concept here, enantiodromia. It's a big, long, fancy word that Jung, I believe, created. And the quote from him is, "It's the emergence of the unconscious opposite in the course of time." So this is about the compensation principle of equilibrium, right? When you develop a position that's too one-sided, either in your consciousness or in your unconsciousness, you will develop also an equal and opposite position in the other one. And if you are going to take care of that, that's fine. You'll take care of it. But if you don't take care of it, the opposite position will eventually inhibit your performance. And remember, in coaching, we're looking at performance. So you're going to be building up this opposite position, let's say in your unconscious, that starts to slowly break out into your conscious world. You start saying things that maybe you didn't mean. You start doing things that maybe you don't know why you did them, or you couldn't help yourself. And if you keep letting it go, what ultimately can happen is you can turn into the opposite. The opposite side can break through and take control. And now you are the thing you ultimately didn't want to be. We have examples of this in, let's say, mythology. Christian mythology, for example, we have the tale of Paul, where Paul was a persecutor of Jesus. He hated Jesus. He was very one-sided in his conscious position. He did not like himself some Jesus. He did not like that at all. And what happened in Paul's unconscious? He denied it, denied it, denied it. And this position in favor of Jesus slowly built up and built up and built up until what happened? He had this experience where his unconscious broke through, and he saw light, and he saw the image of Jesus saying, "Hey, why are you persecuting me?" And then what happened? He turned. He became the opposite. He became one of Jesus's biggest supporters instead of persecuting him. So there is an example of what can happen in the concept of enantiodromia. You can become your opposite if you do not address it. There's also the idea we talked about of the yin and yang, but also the I Ching, which is based on the yin and yang principles, is a whole Eastern method of augury and looking at the unconscious, which is completely parallel to this. We'll say a little bit more about that in a little while. But we're going to look a little bit more into the doing approach to life. And then we're going to look a little bit more at the being approach to life. What does it mean to have a doing, or what is entailed with a doing approach to life. So, Olga, do you want to read that paragraph for us?
Of course. Western idea influence on Jung. As a psychiatrist, son to a family with 6 priests, Jung was a Western and was raised up by the Western idea that the world had been created by God, the divine creator, the initiator, planner, organizer, all powerful and knowledgeable.
Right, the initiator, planner, organizer.
Initiator, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so the Christian idea of God, what Jung was brought up in, is that God is a planner, God is an organizer, God is all powerful, God is like a clockmaker who builds the clock and runs the clock. So that was the image that's in Jung's own psychology. So but that is a very Western approach to the universe and religion and psychology, right? We have this understanding of the world being like a clock. And if there's a supreme being of your choice, the supreme being of your choice is a architect or a clock watcher. And that as humans, our job is to analyze the clock and know things about the clock. And this is where psychoanalysis came from. Psychoanalysis came from Jung and Freud before him. And it is derived from this whole idea that everything works according to a plan, according to a method. Aristotle was an early representative of this approach because he thought about virtues and he thought about how things should be and how people should behave, right? So we have these images of like a web where everything is connected and orderly, and a clock, right? Galileo, another famous figure of Western thought. Galileo claimed that God spoke in a mathematical language, that if only we just knew more math, we could know the mind of God and we could know what God was. And that's a very doing principle way to come at the problem. Because if you can just analyze your way enough, you can know everything. That's the doing principle concept. So this is what contributed to Jung and to his concept of the animus, of the doing principle. There is also a being principle of life, which you can imagine is going to be a little different than that. So, Talita, do you want to read for us the text here?
Eastern approach to the world. The Eastern approach is opposite. The world is perceived as a self-organized system, existing and terminated endlessly, without a creator, with no beginning and no end.
Right. So the world is just a system of all these beautiful things interacting and working together. And there's not really a plan. They just do. They just be. They just are. Here we have like this comic here down at the bottom, right? 3 famous Chinese philosophers, right? You have this, I think this was Taoism right here in the left. It's the vinegar. They're looking at pickles. The vinegar is sour. We must teach the correct recipe in order to make proper pickles. That is a very doing approach to life, right? There is a recipe. It must be precise. We must follow the steps in order. And then you have Buddha, which represents the opposite take, the being principle. The vinegar is bitter. Only by not desiring a pickle can one eliminate the bitterness. Make more or desire less. There's nothing you can do about it. It just is. Right? And then I think it was Lao Tzu who kind of united them. It's all good. Sure. The vinegar is both sour and bitter, but this is the way nature intends pickles to taste. Yes, there is a method, but yes, it also just is. Yes, there is a doing and there is a being. They are both part of nature. This is both These are both needed. You can't have one without the other. For any of you martial arts practitioners out there like myself, right, you're very familiar with the concept of yin and yang, where yang is the opposite, the opposing force. Martial arts styles that are influenced more by yang use a lot more strikes and punches. Forward, they go forward, they don't retreat. Yin-based martial arts styles are more receptive. They accommodate. They take in the aggression that's coming at them and they redirect it. They move it somewhere else. Think of judo, where the punch comes in and you let the punch go by and you just let the person go. Aikido, things like that. You see this person here. He is standing and he has a lot of dualities about him, being and doing. There is a hand pointing to the earth. And then there is the opposite hand pointing to the sky, right? So you have a union. You have the being and the doing. Notice that his stance is up and down. There, his lower half is very rooted to the ground. You see his knees are a little bit bent. You see that his center here is directly above the ground. And you can draw a line almost through the middle of his body. And then look at his head. It's almost as if there's a string pulling his head to the sky. There's a sky portion up here and an earth portion down here. He is unified in the up and down direction, and he is unified in the left and right direction. He is using both the being and the doing principles. That is Eastern martial arts. We have qualities we can associate with yin and yang, right? So let's get, I don't know, Maria, you want to read the qualities for yang?
Yes, masculine, external, doing, purpose, goal setting, enacting an agenda on the world. Personal, I don't understand the word, agency.
Agency, like making laws and making rules.
Personal agency, autonomy, rationality, logic, intellect, logos. Individuality, transformation, change, stoicism, analytical, prowess, discernment. Direction, commitment.
Right. Discernment is being able to judge the difference between one thing and another.
Thank you.
And okay, do we, Alexandra, do you want to read the yin?
Which one?
Oh, you can do it. Whichever one speaks first.
Yeah. So yin, the feminine, internal, being, awareness of the present moment, connection to the unconscious, embracing paradox, cognitive dissonance, exploring the mysterious, non-rational, eros, nurturing, caring, connection to wisdom, emotional intelligence, unconditional love, respect for the earth and its creatures, dark, mysterious stillness.
Yes.
Ooh.
Good. Yeah. So all of these things, and notice the symbol, there's movement within this symbol. So forces and energies move back and forth between the yin and yang, right? He is not in motion, but if he were to be in motion, part of him would go down, and at the same time, part of him would go up. Part of him would go forward, but at the same time, part of him would go back. If you throw a punch, this hand is going forward, but you also have an opposite hand that is moving backward in a martial art. There's unification through both yin and yang. Something goes forward, something goes backward too. And that is a demonstration of how the being and doing principles work together, and you need them both. It's not about being one or the other. So we have some figures I'd like to talk about, some people. This is Richard Wilhelm. Richard Wilhelm was what you call a sinologist, a person who studies China and Chinese art and literature. And he was a German, the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, who went to China, became fluent in Chinese, and translated works from the Chinese literature into German, including the I Ching, which is a very famous Chinese work on using the masculine and feminine being and doing principles. The book, The Secret of the Golden Flower. He was also a very close friend of Carl Jung. Carl Jung was very sad when this man passed away. Carl Jung wrote introductions for his books and was very sad at his passing. Richard Wilhelm had a son who was also a sinologist, who founded the Richard Wilhelm Translation Center, and that was in 1993. So this man's descendants are still around. That is a picture of the cover of the I Ching, the Book of Changes. And the I Ching is very interesting because it tosses coins or anything that has a heads or tails or two sides to it, and it looks at the combination. There's usually 3, and it looks at the combination of 3 that you get from that, and then it maps them to some diagrams. When they started out with these, they would take vessels, like clay vessels, and put them in fire, and some of them would crack and some of them would not. And then if they had patterns to the cracks, they would judge it by that. So that's why even today, some of these things are long and some of these things are cracked. You see, if you look across and then down, so there's a long one, and then a cracked one. That's just showing you like one possible outcome if you throw 3 clay pots into a fire. 2 didn't crack and 1 did crack. And that's what it's looking like here. The long ones are like a stick, right? So doing principle. And the cracked ones, it's like a being principle, a cave, a container, right? So depending on the combination, they give them names. So like long, cracked, this would be wind. So this would be wind or air, or because it's like the ground, and then you have wind above it, which is blowing. Air being a doing principle. This would be water. So you have, for example, water above and water below with land in between. So there's waters above and there's waters below in the sky and in the earth. This would be mountain. You have earth with sky on top of it, right? And this would just be earth, just all earth. This is sky. So look, sky, long. And the Hebrew is too blurred here. I can't read the Hebrew anymore, but that's what these are. So there's more than
lake.
It's a lake. It says you can make that out. It says lake.
Yes, Agam. It's a lake.
Agam. Oh, there it is. Agam Lake. So yeah, so that makes sense. Water, sky, earth. So yeah. Oh, wait, that's weird. I don't know why that's reversed. Huh. Okay. Can you make out the other 2? I can't make
It's
that
fire.
out.
This one is
Okay.
fire.
Yep. Okay,
Yes,
that's
yes.
fire. And what's the last
And
one?
Sarah, storm.
Storm. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so these are not all the possible combinations. There's lots of combinations. But by looking at these combinations, they were able to ask questions, and then their unconscious would interpret the results and answer their questions for them. It's like a self-coaching process, right? It's their own personal Jungian coaching, except they didn't know who Jung was. They didn't have Jung. And it was exactly parallel to what Jung created. And it astonished Jung when he went to learn about this stuff, because it validated him, and it validated that both the East and the West came up with the same thing. Cliff, you want to read the paragraph there?
Sure. Jung's foreword to the book, 1924. Since I am not a sinologue, a foreword to the book of changes from my hand must be a testimonial of my individual experience with this great and singular book. It also affords me a welcome opportunity to pay tribute again to the memory of my late friend, Richard Wilhelm. He himself was profoundly aware of the cultural significance of his translation of the I Ching, a version unrivaled in the West.
Yeah. So you can see Jung is quite upset about his friend passing, but very he admires his friend for the work his friend did, and that was to show us that the I Ching, the Eastern principle of being and doing. Okay. So I don't know, Theodora, you want to read this one?
Yes. Peter Bishop about Jung. Peter Bishop writes in his book Jung, Eastern Religion and the Language of the Imagination, that Jung visited India back in 1938 to 1939. Jung's first text relating to Eastern culture goes back to The Secrets of the Golden Flower in 1932. In 1936, when his first works on Buddhism appeared, Jung was already 61 years old.
Yes, so you see that Jung began to study Eastern spirituality with regard through the lens of his own psychology. He began to study this when he was already in the second half of life. He was 61 years old, and he was astonished by it. He actually did not expect to find so many parallels, not only in Chinese philosophy and spirituality, but also Indian philosophy and spirituality. That there seems to be a universal principle in human philosophies and spiritualities for being and doing. So this was Pauli, and let's see, I'm blocking my screen here. Okay, there we go. Pauli was a physicist and also a friend of Jung. If you're familiar of the Pauli exclusion principle, which basically says two particles cannot occupy the same state at the same time in the same place, he really did a lot in the beginning for physics, for that area of physics, but he helped Jung to reconcile the Eastern and Western elements in the human psyche. He helped Jung with the principle of synchronicity. So if the principle that we give meaning to coincidences based on our own internal psychology, and that these coincidences are not statistically likely, and it is the unlikelihood plus our own selves giving them meaning that creates the synchronicity. And Pauli and conversations between Jung and Pauli are what helped bring that up. I think this slide's a little bit out of order, but there is another man, Erich Neumann, who we'll talk about in a little bit. He came up with the idea of the ego-self axis. This definition of self, because of our confusion earlier in the class, I want to point out when we say self here, we're talking about the unconscious. So the ego-self axis is the axis between the conscious self and the unconscious self. And you can be in multiple states with this. Your condition has a lot to do with your contact, your level of contact between your ego and yourself. And we go back and forth between a lot of these different states all the time. You could have a situation where your ego is being overwhelmed by and swallowed up by yourself. And that is the case that actually started Jung on his journey. He looked at patients with schizophrenia. And patients with schizophrenia, when you talk to a patient who is heavily in schizophrenia with a high condition level, what you're talking to is an unconscious self openly. They don't have a ego self that can actually talk to you. It's swallowed up. You could also be dreaming. We all go into this every night, where your ego kind of sinks down because it's sleeping or off guard, and it touches into the self, and they are communicating back and forth. And if you notice your dreams, they don't make a lot of sense logically. You can be in one place talking to one person 1 minute and then a totally different place, and no one cares how you got there, right? Creating is when you're not quite asleep, you're awake, You could be daydreaming. You could be just trying to come up with ideas. But notice ideas always come up from a place of quiet, where we are just kind of letting our ego rest a little bit and not trying to push it. And we just touch into the self a little bit. And that's when all the great ideas come. They come from imagination. They come from daydreaming. And that is one area. Another state you could have is individuating. Notice in the individuation state, we're trying to make the unconscious things conscious. So what are these two things doing? They're touching. They're talking to one another. They're exchanging. They're individuating. And then a final state you could have also is being completely detached, where your ego is separate from yourself, your unconscious. Similarly to this one all the way on the left here, it's very scary to be this way. It does not feel good. It sucks. You could be, for example, having a panic attack. And you could be just completely in your head and completely not touched at all by the self.
That actually represents quite well what a psychopath or a personality disorder.
Oh yeah, how so?
Is. Yeah, because one is not aware of one's unconscious instincts and drives, so one acts completely unaware of. Doesn't know why he acts in a certain way. So one cannot say anything. One cannot say why one does what one does. So, for example, can't say that why I killed a person, for example, or something like that.
I want to ask.
I think.
Go ahead, Olga.
I want to ask, like you said, when you have panic attack, but what if you have panic attack and you are like in this ego, and but at the same moment you are aware what caused it, like you are aware of your thought process that came before panic attack. Is this like this ego self individuating or no? I don't know.
No, because look at the keywords you said. You said aware of, which tells me it's conscious. You know about it. So that's all happening up here. See, I am an agoraphobe. I have agoraphobia. That means I am afraid of open spaces. I can't really go to a beach or a big field. It's too scary. And I usually avoid those places. But when I have to go to places like that, I start to feel this state here where I'm thinking about everything. I'm paying attention to, things that could go wrong. I'm thinking about the fact that I'm about to die, right? And I'm all up here. And my own personal therapy, when I'm having those panic attacks, right, is to start purposely talking to my unconscious. And I find that when I do that, the panic attack subsides a little bit because I have brought myself from here to here. And now I'm asking my unconscious, hey, are you okay? What's going on? No, you're not going to die. You're okay. What do you think? And then it talks back. You see?
Yes, that's what I meant. That's what I wanted to ask, but I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
No problem.
So Josh, quick question. Is the ego equally susceptible to becoming over-identified with doing and being, or is there a predisposition there?
The ego by itself is defined by doing. It is doing. That's all it knows how to do. So, and the unconscious is defined by being.
And so self in the way that we're using it here is coming back to being.
Unconscious. Yeah. We're using Erich Neumann's definitions here.
Thank you.
Just for curiosity's sake, where would we put Hannibal Lecter in here? The detached ones?
Well, if I was taking AJ's information, I might say he's here. Right, AJ? What do you think?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but Hannibal Lecter was he was a coherent. So he was the the second one from the right, I think, but like a complete, like a psychopath, like a person who says, a person who has said that, who has, you know, stabbed a person. A psychopath will say that that person fell into my sword. I didn't stab him. He fell into my sword, and he believes that. So that, I think, is an example of how detached an ego can be from the self, because he's not aware of his murderous drives and instincts. So
Right. His
that,
unconscious.
that sort of things could happen.
Wow.
But Hannibal
Wow.
Lecter was too coherent.
Yeah, he's like too self-absorbed for me,
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
luckily we're coaches. We're not therapists, and we're certainly not psychiatrists.
Yeah.
So we do
Mhm.
not deal with this or this, or even this, because the people we talk to are awake. So coaching primarily exists here.
Mhm.
We're helping people imagine and create, and we
Yeah.
could also help them individuate. So these two things are really what you should be encountering. If you encounter any others, refer out or wake them up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a volunteer to read this one.
Sure, I'll read.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Jung about wholeness. Wholeness is the conjunction of you and me. Any human who lacks relatedness to the other is lacking the wholeness, because the psyche cannot exist without its opposite side, which always dwells in the other.
Right. So one of the first things that happen when you're not individuating, when you're not dealing with something that's down there in the unconscious, is you start to see it in other people. And that is the idea of projection. Right. So if you have a very doing-based principle in your conscious ego, you might, for example, say, why is everyone being this way? Or if you have a very being principle in your head, you might say, why do they keep doing that to me? Right? You're projecting it on others. So be on the lookout for your clients doing that in coaching. Now, it's not your job to necessarily point that out or fix it. That is a therapist's job. But understand it and use that when you're dealing with masculine, feminine, being, doing, and you're developing your approach for the client. Be aware that they could be projecting.
So I have a question. So going back to the quote, the psyche cannot exist without its opposite side. So in someone who's not projecting, does the psyche still have an opposite side in the other, or do they contain their own opposites within themselves?
They contain their own opposites in themselves. They don't need to
But then,
project.
I don't understand the quote then. Wholeness is the conjunction of you and me. So he's saying wholeness is about relatedness.
Yeah, so once you are whole inside, you are able to be whole, more whole with another person, because you're no longer projecting on them. You're seeing what they are, and you're working with that, not what you want it to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I believe, and yet somehow this quote is not entirely set. To me, this quote is a bit confusing.
A bit murky.
Anyway, because it says the psyche cannot exist without its opposite, which always dwells in the other, which I think we're saying the opposite. We're saying its opposite does not dwell in the other unless we project it.
Right. The opposite always dwells in the other unless we project it. And when we get rid of that, when we withdraw that projection, we can see our opposite in the other and be okay with it. And not a problem.
So it's like a mirror in the other. The other like mirror neurons. The other is ourself.
That's right.
Right.
Diana.
I think this is related to your example for Paul and cheeses, because when you mentioned that if someone, he was resisting, and then until his subconscious, which he saw cheeses within him, and then it turned to the opposite. So the opposite is actually the self, the part of you, and the projection is the shadow, right?
The contents of your shadow are often projected outside onto others. Yes. So Paul, both sides were Paul. The pro Jesus and the anti Jesus were both Paul. but Paul was projecting the anti-Jesus outside because it was unconscious. He was sorry, pro-Jesus. He projected that outside because it was unconscious. He saw Christians everywhere and he had to persecute them because inside of himself, in his unconscious, was a Christian.
Okay, so where is his shadow then? Because eventually he became a
Shadow
Christian.
was the Christian.
The part that couldn't be expressed.
Yeah, the part that couldn't be expressed. His ego was anti-Jesus, and his shadow was a Christian.
Because at some point when I was studying, there was a definition of the ego as the shadow plus persona.
The ego is shadow plus persona. No, the ego and the persona are both conscious. The persona protects the ego. It's the barrier that the ego puts between you and the rest of the world. The shadow lies below the level of consciousness, right? And then the ego is the centralizing portion of the conscious self, and the shadow is like the decentralized controlling portion of your unconscious.
True. And so the ego is usually tries to keep the shadow, or the opposite. One of them tries to keep the status quo. Like, for example, like I have my guilt, for example. Okay, there is a force within me that's does not want me to go and figure out where that guilt coming from, because this is how you're supposed to be. This is how you used to be. Like this is safer. This is that. Like so. We stay in that because of the ego, the fear that keeps pressing the shadow. So
maybe.
So goal of our work is to transform that shadow. So if into a better state, into the authentic self, right?
The goal is to understand the shadow, know that it's there, and then make friends with it. It's not going away.
So basically transform it versus ignoring it. So his shadow was being Christian that he hated, and then he transformed it. Is that what you mean?
Exactly right. Well, now in his case, he did not work it out. He did not do the work. So he suffered the consequence. And the consequence was that his ego collapsed and it was replaced by the Christian. His shadow took over, and his shadow took the driver's seat of the human and became the Paul. So you could almost imagine a situation where after that, Paul was not a perfected being. What you could imagine after that is Paul became the Christian in charge, consciously driving, and then the anti-Christian part went down into the unconscious. He didn't write about that, but if you look at some of Paul's writings, it does kind of switch a little bit later where he's pro-Christian, and then there's kind of like these little anti pieces that are kind of inferred in there.
Okay.
He switched places. Paul is an example of what you don't want to be. You don't want to get to that point. You don't want to switch. Do you ever hear of an example of like people who are suddenly good and then turn into Nazis, or Nazis who are suddenly good and turn into not being Nazis? It happens to people when they don't address their one-sidedness.
So that's like a compensative mechanism, and because it's not authentic, it can backfire at any moment.
Yeah, it's what happens when you don't take care of the disease, the dis-ease.
Okay. So Paul could actually rebel against Jesus again.
Technically.
Into that psychology.
Yeah, technically. And what Paul needs to do is reconcile both halves.
Okay.
What is it that he likes about Jesus, and what is it that he just can't stand about Jesus?
Okay. Thank you.
So we want to develop both our masculine and feminine, our being and doing sides with that self-compensate for each other. We want to complete the opposites. We have a more developed function. We have a developed function, could be being, could be doing, depending on the person. we also have inferior function, inferior meaning not as developed as the other one. So usually we all kind of favor one thing or the other, and we work on that one because it's easy, and we just do that one whenever it's kind of like if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And you use your tool, right? But you don't develop the other tools and they become inferior. So inferior is the Jungian psychology term for undeveloped, not used as much. So personal conflicts can be an opportunity to see this, because you might see yourself in another. You have to ask yourself, what is causing this reaction in me? Why am I reacting this way to this person? As a coach, you may react a certain way to what a coachee brings in, and you may have to figure that out so that way you can help your coachee to get past your own stuff. You could have other challenges with a parent, a mother or a father or a business partner. And when you project on them your problems, this is an example of one-sidedness that could be an opportunity, if you're willing to be aware of it, an opportunity to work through these being and doing principles and balance the undeveloped one, or to have your coachee do the same thing. So this is Erich Neumann. Erich Neumann was the one who came up with the ego-self axis, and he was probably one of Jung's favorite students, favorite clients too. He was a client of Jung as well. And before World War II happened, Jung told, this was a Jewish man, he told Erich Neumann, hey, listen, you have to get out of here, because they were in Germany. He says, there's a war coming. You have to get out of here. And Erich Neumann moved in 1934 to Tel Aviv before World War II started. So he got out away from the Nazis before it would have been too late. Jung did actually predict pretty well World War II. If you read Jung's writings that were written just before World War II, he was always saying something about something in my patients right now is very strange. There's something that's happening with their archetypes that are coming up, and they're getting rid of logic, and these archetypes are starting to take over, and something bad is about to happen. Jung wrote about that before World War II happened. So he knew, and he sent Erich Neumann away. And Erich Neumann would occasionally go back later in his life to study with Jung. And he expanded on Jung's ideas of consciousness. He came up with the ego-self axis, but also wrote a lot about the masculine, the feminine principle, the doing principle of Mother Earth. So I warn you, of course, he does call this, he does refer to this stuff in his books, if you read them, as the Great Earth Mother, and he does call it feminine or mother archetypes. There's two dimensions that we have to think about when we think about being and doing principles. They can be developed or undeveloped. So we already kind of went over that, right? But they can also be positive and negative. And I do not mean positive and negative in the sense of good or bad. I mean positive and negative more in the sense of like electricity, positive or negative. There are polarities, there are poles. Positive pole tends to promote things, encourage things, expand things. And negative pole tends to inhibit things and restrict things. Now remember, it's not about good or bad. Like, for instance, if I use my negative influence to stop someone from abusing drugs, that will work out very well for them, right? I've used a negative pole to do something good, right? If I use a positive pole to promote overeating and overexertion, somebody can burn out. So you have an example there of using a positive pole and something bad can happen. So it's not about good or bad. Positive and negative is more about promotion versus inhibition of things. It's like nature. Is nature good or bad, right? Nature will make you thrive and support you and nurture you, but nature will also kill you. It does not care if the lion comes by and eats you, because that's also nature. So there are two dimensions, okay? So that's just the one thing we're going to be working with a lot coming up. There's the undeveloped and developed dimension, and then there's the pole, positive or negative. So you can have positive femininity, positive being principle, and you can also have negative femininity, negative feminine principle. So the positive would be all of the supportive things: fertility, growth, protection, containment for protection, patience, nurturing. But you can also have the inhibitory ones: instinct. I'm going to conserve. I'm going to do whatever I can to survive. I'm going to hysterically react to things. Melancholy. I'm going to shut myself up in a cocoon and be sad. I'm not going to talk to anybody. Or it could be negative feminine principle of I'm going to suffocate. I'm going to inhibit. I'm not going to let you, I'm going to care for you so much that you're not going to be able to do anything because I won't let you out of my sight. So it could be negative. The other thing to understand from Erich Neumann.
Excuse me.
Sure, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
But
go
what
ahead.
is what is historical reaction to things?
Reactions with a complete lack of thought and lack of understanding of what's going to happen. There was also
Do we have any contemporary term for this? Because hysteria was common for Freud and Royce when they didn't know what they are dealing with.
Correct. Yeah.
But it is actually called completely different, and I don't remember seeing this term anywhere.
The psychological term hysteria, yes, is an old term that's no longer used. Do we have a term that uses that? AJ, are there any modern terms that take some of the definition of hysteria?
It's conversive disorder, and it's also psychosomatic, but it's actually spread around different.
Yeah, lots of different illnesses can have it. Right?
Different categorical diagnosis nowadays, but like it's a little bit harsh. I mean, as a hysterical behavior, I think it's not in use anymore.
Now, and we don't mean this here to be a psychological term anymore. Although when Jung first wrote it, he probably did. What we're talking about here is thinking without acting and not caring whether that's going to have good or bad results. That's all.
This is actually acting out of complexes activation, kind of.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Okay.
Yep. So the other concept from Neumann is that the patriarchal principle, the doing principle, emerges out of the being principle. So in other words, the being principle gives birth to the doing principle. Really, that makes a lot of sense. If you go back far enough in history, our ancestors were just completely animals. They were just animals. They weren't human yet. And your dog or your cat is the same way we were at some point long ago in history. Think about your dog or your cat or your other pet. They are completely feminine. They're principle. They're completely being principle, right? The dog or the cat doesn't think. It reacts on instinct. It has an instinct. It's hungry. It eats. It has to go to the bathroom. It goes to the bathroom. It may realize that it can learn things about reward and punishment, so it changes its behavior according to those things, but it's not thinking. So those animals operate completely within the being principle, and so did we. All right. It wasn't till a certain period in our history where we started to evolve the ability to think and evolve the ability to reason. And it was at that time where you start to get just the glimmers little bits of the doing principle emerging, and it emerged from the being principle. The being principle was the basis, the foundation. It all came from the being principle, which makes sense because, you know, we all came from a being principle, right? Every one of us. So the Neumann principle of being in the human psyche, right, talks about society following nature's principles. And that's what I mean by that, what I just said. All of your bestial drives and your instincts are still there, and they're still motivating you to some degree. But so is your intuition. So is your creativity. All of these things are also part of the being principle. Intuition is the ability to observe passively and take in information and then come up with connections that you didn't think of mentally. You just came up with them because you're seeing all this stuff and taking it in, and then it's just creating out of you. That's how intuition works. And it is a being principle. You can't think about thinking actually inhibits intuition. Imagination, same thing. All occurs under the moon, the light of the moon. Moon is a feminine being principle sign, another one. Why? Because it's out there at night, and it also has cycles. All right. And the whole idea of cycles is another clue you look for when you want to think about being principle. There are cycles involved. Circumambulation is the word. So the cycle of life, going from baby to old person to dying, it's another cycle. It's another being principle that has existed long, long before we were able to think about anything. When we were animals, we went through these stages. Survival, aggression, these are also part of the being principles according to Neumann, right? When you're just trying to use your instinct to survive, right? What are the instincts, right? Feeding, fleeing, free production, right? Reproducing, fleeing. Oh, I said fleeing, fighting, reproducing, and there was a fourth one. I'm just having a
food. I
said feeding, yeah. Feeding, fighting. Oh yeah, feeding, fighting, fleeing, and free production. There you go, the 4 Fs. Yes. So those are the being principles of survival and instinct. You want food, and you want it now when you're hungry. You want to mate. You want to run if you got danger, or maybe if you think you could take this one, you'll fight him. So, or if you're cornered, you'll fight him. So those are the survival instincts. So think about this. These aggressive things that we do, like having wars or doing sacrifices, they are part of the fighting principle, the fighting and the fleeing principle. These are being principles when we get into wars. Fascist regimes, you might think of, they have all these symbols of, toxic masculinity and things like that. But what's really happening, how have all the fascist regimes come about? They came about when those things failed, when those doing principles of democracy and having a good government run by the people, when those failed, everyone retreated back into a survival instinct regime, a fascist regime, which is come to the mother and the mother will protect you and the regime will protect you. And all you got to do is everything the regime tells you to do. We won't let a thing happen to you. We'll protect you. And boom, there you go. You got Nazis. So there are a lot of terrible parallels to this, by the way, happening now. And it's because these masculine principles, which work very well when everything is hunky-dory and everything is going good and there's no big conflict, we can use these masculine principles. But when stuff hits the fan, we retreat back into these being principles because they're more sustainable. and they're more instinctual for us, and we fall back on them. So we can picture the birth of the male or doing principle coming out of the being principle, and then it collapses. In times of trouble, it collapses back into the being principle and goes away. This book, Mists of Avalon, it's a King Arthur novel, but it also talks about a time period when paganism in the British Isles, which was a very being principle based religion, was slowly being taken over by the Roman Catholicism, which is a very doing based principle religion. And you see this feminine figure here, but look at her. She's got a sword. That's a doing based principle analysis. She's got a goose. This goose has a couple of things that's doing principle about it. It's got a long phallic neck. It also is a bird that flies in air. Air is consciousness, right? It has a horse. She has a horse for speed, right? And look at her clothing. It is not allowing her form, her feminine form, to show. It is covering her feminine form. So you can see here the symbolism of the picture, which is talking about a time when a being-based religious system is being overwhelmed and taken over by a doing-based one. We also have mythology again we can go back to, this time a little bit further to ancient Egypt, where you have the story of Osiris and Isis, these two gods and goddesses, this god and goddess. So in this Egyptian pantheon of gods, there were three siblings. Osiris was a brother, and his brother Set, and the sister Isis. And in those times, and in that mythology, it was okay for brothers and sisters to have ancestral relationships. So they did. But the thing is that Isis and Osiris fell in love. And Set was jealous. He did not like that. So Set took Osiris, killed him, and chopped him up into a bunch of different pieces, and scattered all of his pieces all around the world. Isis was very, very upset about this, and she was crazed with love, and she went and got all the pieces. She couldn't find one piece. Could you guess which piece she couldn't find? She couldn't find his penis. It got eaten by an alligator. I forget. I think that was the mythological animal. So she put all his pieces back together, except for the penis. She found a cedar in Lebanon and fashioned one out of Lebanon cedar, which was, had a high reputation of being a good tree to make things out of back then, and put him back together. And this is a story that came about during a time where Egypt itself was also undergoing a change from a doing-based religious system to a being-based religious system to a doing-based religious system. And it reverberated around the world at times around this, because look at what happened with the Jewish people, right? We left Egypt, a being-based society. We wandered around in the desert. There was an encounter with a god, Yahweh, who most definitely put a doing-based system, imposed a doing-based system on that people, on our people. And now we have another doing-based system religion, which gave rise to Catholicism, which gave rise to Islam. All right, so you have a lot of these Judeo-Christian doing-based systems, because the transformation really of human thought and human minds happened around this myth time with Osiris and Isis. Patriarchal societies have certain qualities that are common, like rituals. There's an initiation ritual. If you think about it, a lot of societies and religions have initiation rituals. Christians have baptism. Jews and Muslims have circumcision. What are you doing with an initiation ritual in these societies? You're separating the child from mama. You don't belong to mama anymore. You belong to papa. And this is the initiation that marks that division from the mother, from the being principle. We're separating you from the being principle so you don't get overwhelmed and inhibited by it, so you can develop your doing principle. This also is about individuality and selfhood, because individuality and selfhood are doing-based principles itself, because the being-based principle is not about having identities. It's not about, it's collective. It's about the society. It's about the everybody, the all, the everyone. When you join the military, your name is taken away. You don't have a name. You're recruit number blah, blah, blah. That's a very being-based principle. You're joining the military. You are a member of the military. You're not you. They own you, literally. So individuality is the opposite. The doing-based principle is, no, you have an identity. You have a name. You are a person. You are somebody. Naturally, our societies, when they have this doing-based principle in place, they have rules. They have logic, rationality. People get to speak, give ideas. People have to comprehend ideas. We have to operate based on principles, abstract principles that aren't necessarily laid out. What has power? The word has power. The law, it's written. It is written. So it is written, so it is done. That is a doing-based principle. If we have a disagreement, we negotiate. We talk about it. We work it out. I give you something, you give me something, nobody's happy, we compromise. All right, symbols that involve with this: light, sun, symbols of the patriarchal principle. You'll see a sun as part of the emblem of a lot of different countries. So when we talk about mating, we're talking about, in this case, we're talking about the intellectual synthesis of ideas, the intellectual mating and bringing together of ideas. It can get a little bit negative. The negative side of the doing principle is when all of that goes too far. You start getting cultish. You start having a lot of different groups or sects that are coming together and imposing their will on another one. You get religious fanatics. Sound familiar? You get excessive spirituality, where the spirituality becomes about the prescriptions, not about anything else. Addiction is also overly direct aggression, making someone do what you decide they should do according to your laws.
But if I may, it's also about not being allowed to break the rules. It's about imposing the rules and just strictly following them.
Yes.
So yeah, it's the opposite of individuality. As we said, you're not allowed to have an opinion of your own. You just follow.
Exactly. Very good. Yes. So there's just a picture, a graphic there of everything I've been saying, right? The masculine principle is birthed from the feminine principle. Notice that it's all here in the consciousness in this drawing. The unconscious is largely in the being principle, although some of it is, some of it's above the line. You are conscious of some of it, but in that vast ocean of your unconsciousness, it's almost all about being way down there, because you need that to support the thinking, or you can't. When we talk about signs in this, you think about churches, right? The Roman Catholic churches, when the religion first started, they were kind of short and squat, and they had like oval circular roofs, and the cross was like an equal arm cross. And it was kind of feminine in that sense. There was a being-based principle, but as it got more institutionalized and more taken over by authority and agency and rulership, these are masculine, these are doing-based principles. the buildings started to get taller. They started to reach up into the sky, the air, the doing-based principle of air and sky. They started to incorporate features in the buildings where they let in light, because light and the shining of light, remember in the vision of Paul, he saw light. The light is a sign of these doing-based principles. The inside of the church is vast and the person is little, to make them contemplate the idea of God and the significance of the rules and the laws compared to yourself. So these churches are built and designed in such a way for a reason. All right, so what I want to do here is, we have great questions going along, but I want to give you guys a method now for actually doing this coaching. We're going to do that, and then I'm going to let 2 of you try it. We have about an hour and 20 minutes left. If we get time for that breakout, we'll get it, but it may not be necessary. But it's important more to give you guys your first try today, okay? So write this down. I'm going to give you the steps. This is how you do the Jungian coaching based on being and doing, okay? Step 1, present yourself as a Jungian coach, okay? And I don't know if Parisa, if you want to write these in the main chat, you could do that. That would be cool. So step 1 is present yourself as a Jungian coach. Step 2 is invite a dilemma from your coachee. Step 3 is ask the coachee to shrink the dilemma into one sentence. Ask the coachee to shrink the dilemma into one sentence. Step 4 for you is figure out if this dilemma is more being or doing based. Step 5 is figure out if the client's approach to the dilemma, how they're approaching the dilemma, is being or doing. And then step 6 is take out the cards and have the client pick the cards. Anyone need me to repeat a step?
Question. You have the client pick out the card from
Yes.
either the being or doing
Based on the opposite.
Of the approach or the
of the approach.
Josh, could you please repeat step 4 and 5? Thank you.
Sure. Step 4 is figure out if the dilemma is being or doing.
Mm-hmm.
Step 5 is figure out if the client's approach
Mm-hmm.
is being or doing.
Got it. Thank you.
I just need a very quick bathroom break.
Yep, let's do it. 5-minute bathroom break. Be back at 50 minutes past the hour. See you guys then. Okay, welcome back. We're waiting for just a couple people to come back from the bathroom break, and we're getting ready to do your first try at coaching. Just wanted to make you remember one thing. If a person comes at you in step 5 and their approach is being, then you're going to use the doing cards, right? You always use the opposite cards of the approach, okay? If they come at you with doing approach, you use the being cards. Has everybody got that?
Yes, I have a question, short
Go ahead.
one.
Go ahead.
Since we are letting a client actually control the session,
Mhm.
do we ask them for permission to let them choose the card? I mean, you asked Diana, but you asked her when she already came to the meaning of the card from 1 to 5. But what if they don't want to use the cards for whatever reason?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're here in this training, so we're restricted to the cards and everyone's going to do the cards. But in a real coaching session, you're right. Under the principles of the ICF, you can't make them do anything. If they don't want to use the cards, you don't use the cards. But you might want to take on a little bit of a trickster if archetype for yourself. Okay. Like when people come to me and are like, I don't want to do the cards, I say things like, okay, you know, if you had to talk to imagination, what would your question to imagination be? Like if you just had to come up with a question for it, what would it be? And they would say, oh, my question would be blah, 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 blah. Okay, I tell you what, if imagination was asked that question and it had to write a letter to you, what would it write? How about you write a letter as imagination and answer the question? And then almost always they do that. I'm like, yeah, tell you what, I'll turn my camera off for 5 minutes. I'll let you write a letter and then we'll go over it. And they're like, yeah. And then they write the letter, you know,
Right.
and
Okay.
so it's dialogue, right?
Okay, thanks.
A little bit of a trickster. Okay. So 2 volunteers. So someone want to volunteer first to be a coach. Who's brave enough? All right. Yes, Alexandra. You had your hand up. Good job. All right. Who would like to be coached by Alexandra? Anyone have a dilemma?
Okay, I can be coached by
Talita, okay. Just one thing, Alexandra, just to get straight before you get it. Is it okay if I give you advice in the chat window? Is that okay?
I can't see chat window. I'm on the phone.
Okay.
But you can tell me. I mean, it's fine. We
That's
did
fine.
this with Vishtan, so she actually was telling, correcting us.
Okay,
It's
if it's
okay.
fine. Yeah, then I'll do that. So go ahead and present yourself, and here we go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alexandra, and I'm your Jungian coach. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well, and you?
I'm doing well too. Thank you. So what's on your mind today?
Okay, so a little bit of background. I work in HR, and this week we had to do a written warning for an employee, and he had a really big reaction, meaning he was really emotional and almost like defensive and really I felt like he was attacking me and his supervisor during the conversation. And I cannot get over that. I feel really bad, even though I know, some things that he did were like a warrant, he did it to himself, like was his actions, and we needed to write him up. But I don't know why it's still bugging me.
Okay. Did you have any particular feeling during, if I understood well, his outburst?
What
Kind
feelings
of,
did you
or
have? What feelings did you
sorry, yes. What feeling did you have while he was reacting that way?
I felt like he was kind of so emotional that he could not think straight, and he could not understand where we were coming from. So anyways, answering your question, I think I'm not being straightforward. So my feeling was almost like I felt like I wanted to fix it, like I wanted to make him understand. I wanted to make him reason with me instead of attacking me. So maybe I was trying to defend myself, in this situation, defending myself would be something like, I want to explain to him why this is going on, but he's not even listening.
Right. Well, yes, you actually told me now what was kind of your intention during this reaction of his, but what the feeling was, what did you feel? Any kind of
I struggle with that.
sensation?
Hold on. Yes, let me think about a feeling.
Okay.
That's something I struggle with often. When people ask me what I'm feeling, I don't know how to answer. Okay, I felt attacked. Is that a feeling? I felt attacked by him. That's not a feeling.
Well, okay. I wouldn't actually define it as a feeling, but we can find a feeling that comes with it.
Alexandra, we're not going to really try. So yes, a therapist and a counselor would want to find a feeling.
Oh, sorry.
You
Sorry.
want to find, no problem. You want to find a dilemma. So for example, you could say, Talita, if this coaching worked, what would you get out of it? Try that.
Oh, okay, Talita. If this coaching worked to the end of this session, how your dilemma would be solved? Is that good?
Yeah. It would, I would understand why I feel bad about the write-up.
Bravo.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for this. Would you like us to use some technique to help you with this?
Yes.
Okay. I would like you to pick one number, and I will show you then one of the being cards.
I can share my screen.
Okay, so please pick one number of the between 2 and 45, right?
2 and 25.
Okay, and then we will see what we got.
17.
17.
Okay. I will look on my window here, sorry.
Coming.
Okay.
Ask her to read it.
Please, Talita, read this sentence that you see on the screen.
What would nurture you in the presence of this problem?
Okay. So, would you like to make a dialogue between yourself, your ego, and the nurture? Nourishment. I'm sorry, Josh. It's the English issue. Nurture is okay.
Nurture is correct.
Okay, so okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question to you, Alexandra?
Of course.
Is the dialogue, between like Talita and nourishment, or the specific thing that I think would nourish me in this problem?
I think that it's between Talita and the nurture as a concept, but I will let our trainer clarify it for both of us.
Yeah, you can hold her to the nurture, because if we go into the other images, it might come off of the cards and we might have to do other techniques. So
okay.
Okay,
so sorry. So we stick to the Talita and nurture, right?
Yes.
Okay, so please, Talita, you turn on one side when you are talking from the position of Talita, and then you turn to other side when you are talking from position of nurture. And if I need you to come to center, I will tell you.
Okay, So who should
Are
start?
you ready?
Yes, I think
Yep.
so.
We will
all-
start from Talita. Sorry.
That's good. Always start from Talita.
Okay.
Okay, we will start from Talita. So please choose your side to turn to. And what would Talita ask Nurture?
Okay, I think I would ask, how can you help me with this situation?
Okay, and now please turn on the other side. What would Nurture respond?
There's more to this than what you're actually seeing. You're being too factual, and it's not really black and white as you're thinking.
Can you please repeat it again?
I think I'm too fast.
Say repeat it 3 times. 3 times is
Please,
important.
please repeat it 3 times.
I think you're being too factual, and the situation is not really black and white as you think. I think you're being too factual, and the situation is not really black and white as you think. I think you're being too factual, and the situation is not black and white as you think.
Great. And then what Talita has to say to Nurture now?
So what am I missing here then?
Excuse me, can you repeat? Something I didn't hear. Done?
I'm far, sorry. I said, what
Just
am
turn on. Yeah, you need to turn, sorry.
What am I missing here?
Okay, and what Nurture is telling you?
Okay. The thing is that you know that writing someone up can eventually lead to them losing their jobs, and you really care about people and their like ability to support their family, and that's really what's going on, because you're already thinking on the possibility of terminating this person, and you know he has a family and how that would impact him.
Can you please repeat 3 times? Someone help me with English from the part that you can terminate. You think about that terminating can whatever that like firing him can. Yeah, it was long, but just the last thing when you actually summarized everything. Sorry, this is
I'm gonna give you a trick, okay? Just
yeah,
say
okay.
Just say repeat the important part 3 times and let them decide.
Oh, thank you. Please, Talita, repeat 3 times repeat the important part of the Nurture response to you. The last one.
3 times.
3 times.
You know that this can lead to termination, and you know he has a family, and you're already thinking about what that scenario would look like. You know this can lead to termination, and you know he has a family, and you're already thinking about what the scenario would look like. You know this can lead to termination, and you know he has a family, and you're already thinking about what the scenario would look like.
Thank you. What Talita has to say to that?
Okay, so what do I do with this?
Okay, and what Nurture tells you? What's the response?
You don't have to do anything because the decision is not really yours.
Please repeat this 3 times.
You don't need to do anything because the decision is not really yours. You don't need to do anything because the decision is not really your decision.
Yeah, once time more. You repeated twice.
You don't need to do anything because it's not really your decision.
Thank you. What's Talita? If there is anything that Talita would respond to this?
Come back to the center for a second, Talita.
I cannot think of anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So that dialogue was done, and sometimes the question is, when is the dialogue done? When does the dialogue finish? And the answer is that you feel it sometimes. Notice that Talita turned back to the center a couple of times already. She was done. There was a conclusion there. She had some kind of insight. So when it feels like it's done, it's done. And you then can ask them, for example, you can ask her, Talita, what insights did you get from this discussion?
From censure. Okay, I was expecting that she will actually give that answer from her side. Okay.
Yeah, she's going to come to you now.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Talita, what insight did you get from this answer Nurture gave you?
Yeah, I realized that the reason why I couldn't like feel okay with what happened is that I'm already like thinking of the worst case scenario. And even if that worst case scenario happens, it's not really my decision. You know, I know I am somewhat involved, but the decision really doesn't come from me. I just want to make sure we're following policies and employment law, but it's not really my call. So that helped me understand a little better. You know, I was probably very anxious about anybody losing a job. I know I feel like that, but yeah, so it was actually two important insights, as I said, that I was thinking about the future, and two, like, it's not really my call. So
okay, does it mean that our conversation helped you ease the dilemma that you had?
Yes, thank you.
How was this conversation useful for you?
Okay. Okay. Talita, how was this conversation useful for you?
It really helped me to kind of get in touch with a feeling that I couldn't not even name, as you saw me, and then really have more clarity in the situation.
Thank you.
And how do you feel about ending it here, Talita? Ask her that.
Talita, how do you feel about ending our session now, here?
Yes, it sounds good to me. Thank you.
Great.
You are welcome. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna, let's see.
We survived.
Yeah. You did more than survive. You did more than survive. Let me just remove your pin so I can see here. Before we go on, acknowledgements, please, for Alexandra and Talita. Go ahead, anybody. Just keep going.
So I have a question. So thank you to both of you. Thank you. It was very brave for you, Alexandra, and also Talita. Thank you very much. But I have actually a question. How can you recognize if a dilemma has a doing or a being approach?
Absolutely. I'll get to that after the acknowledgements. 100%. Hold that question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. More acknowledgements?
Alexandra, I really felt you just stayed so present with Talita through the whole thing. I could really feel your heart, and Talita, I could feel your courage in really bringing a real dilemma, and could feel your struggle within that. So thank you both for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I can go. This was really useful as far as I can really say, because it kind of, especially with your questions, at the end, we kind of had the whole circle, like from the beginning till the end. So now I have a picture of how it can look like. It's just that I would have a question in the beginning when Alexandra mentioned something about nurturing, or and then when Talita asked whether I should understand this as this or like that, my first like an instinct was to say understand it however you want to understand it. Would that have been a mistake?
No, it wouldn't have been, but we're trying to stay within the cards, and it probably would have wound up that way.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
More acknowledgements?
It was a
Just
very
once
clear
again,
structure. Yeah.
sorry, I spoke with someone. Once again, you know, the power of the being, you know, it's overwhelming to see it. Because in the end, the conclusion is you just need to be. I mean, there's nothing to do. I mean, and I'm saying it to myself because I was totally related to the kind of dilemma that you brought, maybe in different forms or different situation. But I'm a doer, I'm a fixer, you know, I always want to, and you want to control the situation in a way, and sometimes you just need to be. So thanks for sharing that and for this example, and this is very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes,
Vital.
yeah. I think, Alexander, it was very well structured, the whole coaching session. There was the main topics were there, and good questions, and also, Talitha, very good that you brought a genuine dilemma, because coaching only works when there is a genuine dilemma that we are working with. So great, thank you.
Thank you. Josh helped us, helped me. I wouldn't be so structured.
You did a good job. Parisa, did you have any general comments?
Yeah, well, yes, I want to thank both of them. As I said again, it's not easy to bring real dilemma and do coaching and be a coachee and coach in front of everyone else. And Alexandra, you did great. And Talia, thank you so much for being so vulnerable in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of you, good job. So just some general thoughts here, okay, for both of you and everyone really. It should help everyone. If the coach, if you the coach, if you the coach are working too hard, something's wrong. All right. In this Jungian coaching, it's so easy because you do hardly anything really. You're not even asking questions. They are asking themselves the questions. That's how it's different from regular coaching. In regular coaching, you have to ask powerful questions. You have to constantly be on your feet and think of powerful questions all the time. That's hard. This is easy. This is that letting them ask the questions to themselves. So you also don't want to take them out of their immersion, because you can see it in someone's eyes when they start talking to their unconscious. You can see it. Their eyes kind of switch because they're going inside. All right. When you see that, try not to take them out of it. Try not to jar them. And too many words will jar them. So if they're switching back and forth, you know, all you have to say is, Talita says, okay, blah, 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 blah. Nurture says, blah, 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 blah. You don't have to ask a question, just 2 words. Talita says, Nurture says. That's it. It keeps them in their emotion. Now, sometimes you have to ask a question. Sometimes you have to suggest a question, and that's fine. If you have to do that, you do that. Notice when the dialogue is done, the person will come to the middle. All right. Ask them what their insights are. Sometimes that insight will generate another card, or sometimes that insight will generate another image. Okay, well, how would you feel about speaking to this one? Notice I almost never say, all right, let's speak to, or let's talk to. I always say, how would you feel about talking to? Because I thank goodness I did that, right? Because when I was talking to Diana today, she didn't want to. She didn't want to talk to the one that we suggested. If I would have just said, okay, let's talk the discipline, right? I'd be imposing on her. She didn't want to do that. So I'm using, how would you feel about talking to discipline or nurture or things like that? So these are coaching tidbits that you practice and you pick up techniques for yourself so you can stay safe with the client and keep doing trust. Remember, one of the coaching competencies is establishes trust. So you have to establish trust with the client. And that's part of how you build trust. I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do. Okay. Malika, could you repeat your question for me? You had a question earlier?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I was thinking, how can you recognize sorry, a feminine or a masculine, so doing, being in the approach of a coachee?
Yeah.
Yeah, if a coach is coming with a dilemma, how can you recognize if it's being or doing?
Yeah.
Like
It's
in
hard.
the case of Talita, for example, how can we recognize that?
Okay. Well,
I can tell you how did I recognize this?
Yeah, good. Go.
Because Talita was telling words like, what can I do? She was intellectualizing it. She used her cognitive weapon, so to speak, and this is doing principle. So that's the way that I had no dilemma which one to choose. If she was like, oh, I went to restroom, and then I cried, and I felt like my heart will go out, and I remembered her wife, and then I would know that she's using being, so I have to use doing. So that's how I decided.
Yeah, Alexandra, you're gonna be a good coach. Yes. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So exactly as she said, I could not have said it better. Diana, go ahead.
So when Talita said that she doesn't know why she's hung up to it, is that now the thoughts being in thoughts and just thinking and thinking, analyzing, that's the doing part?
No, it falls more into I don't know what to do. If someone says to you something like, I don't know what to do, you go at them with the being cards.
Oh, I think I missed that part. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what to do. You get the being cards. Talita.
I have a couple of questions, 2 questions actually. The first one is, I know I did not answer the question from the card. Is that how we're supposed to use the cards, or is it just a way to use the cards?
So the idea for the card is the bolded word is what the intention. We intend for you to speak with the bolded word, which was nurture. And I'm being strict today in the being doing card training to hold you to the bolded word. But when you go and you do this for real, all right, there might be other words in there that catch their attention. And you might want in other words in the sentence that they might want to speak to. And that's fine. They might be thinking about images. The cards might bring up pictures in their heads, and then they might talk to the image, and then you might do symbolic thinking. So sometimes like this might kind of flow into the symbolic thinking side, and sometimes it'll stay strictly in the being doing cards. But like you had nourishment, and you kept doing the Freudian slip into nourishment. So it's like, oh, something's going on there with nourishment. If we were not being strict, I would have said, so wait a second. I heard 2 times already you slipped and said nourishment. What would you think about speaking the nourishment if that feels better than nurture? And I would have gone on there. But again, strictly speaking with the cards, you speak to the bolded word.
Okay, thank you. And my other word is, I know she was asking for a feeling, and I usually suck coming up with feeling. I'm not really good at that. But I know in coaching sometimes when someone comes with the feeling, like I'm feeling anxious. Now I know that's how I was feeling, right? Like you have said, I'm feeling anxious. So in the beginning of the session, we ask, in a scale from 1 to 10, how anxious are you? And then at the end to close, now how anxious are you? So is that something we can also use, or like for the sake of this module, we're not kind of using too many things?
So here's the thing about the way we view feelings in coaching. We're not going to do psychological archaeology on you to find out why you feel that way or that it's your mother's fault or whatever. Okay. We're coaches, not therapists. So in coaching, the feeling is one of 2 things. Either they have such an emotional feeling right now that they just can't do any coaching with you. And you have to address the intensity of that feeling in the moment. So you work with them on that by just feeling it and sitting with them and being there with it. You don't try to solve it. You're coaching through the emotion. Okay, feel it. And how you doing? And eventually it'll calm down. There's techniques for that, like coaching for emotion. But the other thing is the feeling could be tied to an image, or it could be tied to a card or a principle, and then we can talk to it. We can speak to that feeling. We can speak to that principle, and we can find out, and we can coach them through that. Those feelings tend to be slightly less intense. Like someone could come into you and they could be feeling so intensely that they just can't do the Jungian coaching work yet. And you have to kind of coach them through that feeling first to get that out of the way, not solve it, but get it out of the way, let it pass. So that way you can do the work, you can do the coaching. So it's not, that's the difference between coaching and therapy. We're not trying to solve or find out what's behind the feeling.
Thank you.
Next in the list, I have Cliff.
Hey, there's the process of setting up. We're going to use some cards. Here's the process. Once the card is chosen, is there benefit need to anchor it all or find a grounding of like, what is nurture to you? What might be nurture to you? Or is it just at face value? We just roll in.
I would just roll in. If you start to ask them to associate, it could lead into like the therapy realm. We're here to help them get out of their own way, not treat them or cure them. So there's something in their way, and we're going to talk to it, and we're going to remove that obstacle from their way. That's coaching.
Right.
And now that's about talking to it, not necessarily about asking them to associate and go deeper into the archaeology.
Yeah, I suppose my question, kind of following on to that, is that when we're doing the 2-chair exercise or the empty chair exercise, that's really, I would be embodying the being card, right? I would be embodying the doing card. How do I invoke as a coach that being nurturing or that being imagination?
For you or for them?
For them.
So sometimes what I'll do is I'll have them when they're doing the chair exercise, like if it's time for them to be the being,
sure,
I'll say, okay, I just want you to sit there, close your eyes, take a deep breath, let it out, and I want you to picture being this thing. I want you to picture nurture. I want you to embody nurture, and I want you to speak as nurture. Don't think, just talk as nurture, whatever nurture says. And that I do that for people who are reluctant and they need a little help. So that'll help them embody it. Some people just go right into it. They're like, yeah, okay.
Okay, great, thanks.
Malika, I have next.
Yeah, actually the question was really, I mean, I think you almost answered the question, but can I also ask the coachee what does it mean? What does the word mean for him or for her? Like nurture, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, in terms of the definition of the word, sometimes you have to clear that. Like if the word is not a word they know in English, you might have to clear that up. Or if the word could have two meanings, you want to clear that up. And you want to make sure they're talking about the one you both understand. That's true. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Alexandra.
I just want to confirm this linguistic issue, since it's not the same in every language. But now, while you were all talking and before I was thinking, we actually have to keep the word that's offered at the first moment. So we don't have to put it in another form, as I suggested, nourishment, even Talita, because actually then we are opening another realm. So we just stick to it, and only if something is not clear, we go for like clarification.
Correct.
Is
Also,
that okay?
That is okay.
Actually, it can be done in any language, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. But when the card is nurture, and you say nourishment, you're imposing that on the coachee. It may not be what they were thinking, and
okay,
that's not coaching. So we're going to stick with it. Now, if the coachee comes up on their own a bunch of times with a slightly different word, then we can say, oh, what's this? Let's talk to that word. That's different because the coachee is leading the agenda.
Now, I thought if coachee doesn't really understand the word isolated, that might happen.
Yeah,
that was my question.
That's fine.
So then we clarify. Otherwise, we stick to the word that's original. Okay, thanks.
Correct. Yes. All right. Good. Good. Okay, so I just want to get into a few more things before the end of the day. There's a lot to cover. I don't want to get too far behind. So just a few more slides. So remember, summarizing the being principle, emotion, containment, cycles, intuition, Mother Earth, circulation, darkness, symbols, instinct, lust. Lust is just following the instinct to mate. Whereas you have the doing principles, linear thinking, lines, speed, penetration, intrusion, being intellectual, intellectualizing, rationalizing, being disciplined, following an order, or being in an order, language, conveying ideas through speaking, having individuality. Those are the doing principles. When Jung separated from Freud, Freud kicked him out of the Psychological Society. I believe that was like 1923 or something along those lines. Jung got very heavily into alchemy. Jung discovered, it was 1913. Jung discovered that alchemy, the fake science of chemistry back in the Middle Ages, was actually an analogy for psychology. The people there didn't have really the tools or the words to talk about psychology or what went on inside of your psyche, because they were too involved. Science and God were the same thing for them. They didn't separate religion and science. So alchemy was like this unified religion science thing that enabled them to talk about psychology with the tools that they had at the time. And he talked about this, he found this book called the Philosophorum Rosarium. And in the book, there was, for example, a drawing that looked like this. And you can see a lot of these principles in here. You see a king, and the king is standing on a sun. A lot of doing principles in there, right? Kingship, rulership, agency, and light. Light. And on the other side, there's a queen, right? Queen is standing on a moon, right? And look at this. They have a bird here up at the top symbolizing the consciousness, the ego, the light of consciousness. And look at them. They are holding hands. They're joining their left hands together. When the masculine and the feminine unite, that you have a spiritual connection. You have a whole. And you might think by looking at this drawing, oh, okay, this is the man on the left and this is the woman on the right. But what you're actually looking at is the inside. You're looking at the unconscious. And the unconscious, the male portion here is an animus. And the female portion here is an anima, which means on the outside, the people, you have here someone who egoically identifies as female. And on the other side here, you have a male ego. So if your egoic identification on the outside is female, you have an animus, which is male, doing principle. And if you're egoically identified as male on the outside, you have an anima on the inside, or a being principle on the inside. So the idea is, let's take example first for a person who identifies as male. Their ego, they say their ego is male. They say that they are a man egoically, consciously, and they have, you would say that this person has an anima, and they also have feminine energy or being energy. If you have the opposite case where a person egoically identifies as female and they say their ego is female, then they have an animus or male energy. They have an animus or feminine energy. or being energy inside of them. So we all contain both parts that tend to oppose each other as you go down the line. This is the physical body. This is the unconscious emotional piece. And they kind of flip-flop their genders as you go down. If you had another layer on top of that, like the mind or the thinking mind, right, you could say that it would flip again. So that's the layout that Jung discovered in this book and through drawings like this. So when you have a relationship between two people, right, you have a relationship between, and again, we're just talking about their outward egoic identifications here, a man and a woman. And here are their unconscious selves, with the man having an anima and the woman having an animus. And if you look at this relationship on the outside, they may be getting along really well. They may appear to be living in harmony and doing okay. But look at what do you guys see? Who sees anything in the drawing below on the unconscious level? What can you see?
They are not facing each other.
Yeah, they're not facing each other. So unconsciously, this relationship may not be going very well because they're not connecting on an anima-animus level unconsciously. And that could be a problem that someone comes to you with. They may not be connecting with their other person's anima and animus. How do we handle that? Well, you could coach both of them at the same time, or you could coach one of them. But remember, always the principle in coaching. You can't coach the ghost. You can't coach the ghost. You can't coach the person who's not there. You can only coach the person who is there. But that's okay, because if you can make one of these people more understanding of their dilemma and understand what to do about their dilemma, you're still doing the other person a favor, because that you've now allowed your coachee to change their behavior. And when they go back to their partner and they change their behavior, things may work out and maybe the partner will change too. It happens. We have this in the body all the time. We have being and doing principles operating within us. You have red blood cells, you have white blood cells in your blood, two major different categories of blood cells. The red blood cells are very passive. They circulate, doing being principle, circulation, and they collect, they contain oxygen. They passively pick up the oxygen in the blood vessels in the lungs, in the alveoli, and then they passively just let it go throughout the body's tissues. There's no, every cell in your body is no more than 1 or 2 cell spaces away from a capillary, from a source of blood and oxygen from a red blood cell, except for cartilage. But then there's white blood cells who completely behave the opposite way. White blood cells seek out and destroy bacteria and other invaders. So the white blood cells are active, and some of these white blood cells can even leave your veins and arteries and go crawling into your tissue to go get things. They can do that. They call those kinds of white blood cells are called macrophages. And that is a doing principle. They do it. They go after it. They get it. They go kill it. So even in the physicality, in your physical self, you still have these being and doing principles operating together. Blood contains both. So I told you earlier that your anima or animus could be developed or undeveloped, but that was just kind of a simplification that we started you out with. So that way you could kind of get the concept. But now we're through with the simplification and we can get a little bit more detail. It turns out that if you look inside of an anima or an animus, you have a lot of different parts. You have a lot of different traits. the outer feathers in this fan here represent an animus and its parts. Not even all the parts. These are just examples. These are just example traits. Animus parts could be about your order, your boundary, your law, your way of making meaning, persistency, your organizing ability, your structure, your hierarchy, your respect for hierarchy, your ability to act, your time management. These are all things that could be developed or undeveloped. And by the same token, in your anima or in your feminine energy, you could have developed or undeveloped creativity, irrationality, nurture, containment, feeling, repetition, or how much you value repetition, instincts, how much you value process, your level of imagination, and your ability to use intuition. All of these little pieces could be developed or undeveloped. So it is not really accurate to say that we have an undeveloped anima or an undeveloped animus or an undeveloped masculine energy or feminine energy. It's not accurate because people are a mess. Inside of your mess, you have a lot of things that are both developed and undeveloped in all of us. And every one of us here would have a very different profile of which of these are developed and undeveloped, right? So you might have a woman, that person identifying as a woman who's really well developed in time management. She has her time scheduled to the minute and she follows it.